Hello, everyone. Beep. Hello. Welcome to another Dracula reading, chapters 9 through 12. How are we all doing? I'm very excited for this section. I'm also very nervous because I might have to juggle a lot of characters and I need to remember the hotkeys for all of them. So I guess wish me luck. In the past sections, like the first section of reading that we did, it was basically just Dracula and Jonathan. So that was easy, right? It was like we got Dracula, we got Mad Dracula, we got Jonathan, we got Sad Jonathan, and we've got the NPCs, and we've got me, just normie, right? And then the next section was mostly Mina and Lucy. Like, we had a lot of characters that I had to make, but for the most part it was Mina and Lucy. And then a couple others. Dr. Seward showed up. Renfield, but, you know, Renfield's kind of like a package deal with Dr. Seward, so it's a bit easy to keep track of that. So on the numpad, I currently have, for those of you who weren't here for the stream where we were setting up all of the PNGs for tonight, I have PNGs attached to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and asterisk. PNGs 1, 2, 3, and 4 all have alternates as well. So, so that's 11 at the base, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Because number 4 has 2 alternates. So there's 16 different things that I need to try to keep track of while we're reading this tonight. So wish me luck. I think we can do it. Because fortunately, a lot of this is written in like... Uh-oh. Is that my child? Now? At 9 p.m.? It is. I'll be right back. Okay. That makes me a little nervous. Normally, the kid wakes up around 1 a.m. The fact that she's woken up around 9 concerns me a little, but that's okay. We are doing 4 chapters at a time. So we've done 2 streams so far, chapters 1 through 4, and then chapters 5 through 8. And now we're doing 9 through 12. So for a reminder on what happened in the reading so far, I will try to keep this super brief. I'll do my best. Basically, the start of the book is our good buddy Jonathan, and he goes to Transylvania. He goes to Transylvania to meet with a count who wants to move to England named Dracula. And he meets this guy, and the whole time that he's on his way there, everybody's like, yo, that's bad vibes, you should not do that. And he's like, wow, these people are so strange, but, well, I've got a job to do, so I guess I'll just keep on keeping on. The whole way there, like, his whole carriage ride to the actual place is just fucking haunting, and it's awful. And he gets there and is like, well, at least I'm here now with this nice gentleman Dracula. I'm sure everything's fine. And it just gets progressively more and more wild at this guy's house until eventually he realizes, like, holy shit, I'm a prisoner. Oh my god, I don't think I'm leaving. And it's a mess. And so, like, a lot of his section is a collection of journals and also writings to his fiancée, Mina. We flash to the point where Dracula is leaving to go to England. And Jonathan is still in his house, expecting to potentially die there, but wants to escape. We flash to Mina, who is in England and is visiting her good buddy Lucy. Mina and Lucy. Mina is hanging out with Lucy and is daydreaming about Jonathan. Is like, it's so weird. I haven't been hearing from Jonathan very much. I hope he's okay. I miss him, you know. Meanwhile, Mina has 8 dudes who just desperately want her affection. She had a whole section where she was like going into detail about every single guy that has like asked her to marry them lately, and it turns out they're all friends. Very weird. And there's a huge section of what we read last time that revolved around a storm. A huge storm happens. And there's this ship that is just like floating all over the place. There's crashes, there's people dying. And in this small town that they're in, the seaside town that Mina and Lucy are in, it is the biggest deal, right? This ship, when it finally lands, has oh my god, I'm trying to even remember exactly what happened, but basically there are accounts that are found on the ship once the storm is gone and it finally lands. This dog jumps off the ship and runs off into the night. And all that they find on the ship is the captain who has tied himself to the wheel. And when they find all of the captain's logs inside of the ship, it turns out that something was killing off the crew one by one. And at the end of it all, the captain is like, there's a man on this ship who is killing people. It's a monster. I don't know what to do. But, I'm going down with my ship, basically. Ties himself to the wheel. And that's how they find him when the storm has abated. I'm trying to remember if there's anything before... Oh, right, yes, of course there is. Holy shit. Yes, of course there is. So, I was going to be like, and then she gets a letter from Jonathan, and she's like, cool, I'm leaving for Transylvania. That is not what happens. So... Something we skipped is that Lucy is a sleepwalker. Lucy has been sleepwalking more and more and more. It's been getting more and more worrying. Mina has this whole recollection of Lucy vanishing in the middle of the night, and she goes out to try and find her and finds her sitting at a bench that they spend a lot of time at. And there's a man basically like leaning over her. This is after the boat has landed. There's a man leaning over her. She finally gets close enough, and the man is gone, and we, the reader, are told, Lucy has 2 little pricks on her neck. It must be because Mina did something weird with her. Well, she was like trying to put her cloak on or something. And as the reader, we're like, Lucy seems to be dying. She gets really, really sick. And then suddenly is better. She gets really sick. Her mom has been sick for a long time. So Mina is like, holy shit, the mom is dying. My best friend is dying. I don't know what to do. But then suddenly she's feeling a lot better. But she still sleepwalks. And Mina's like, well, the sleepwalking is fine as long as my friend is okay and feeling better. She seems like she's in good spirits. She's got more energy now. I'm so glad. Then she gets letters in the mail that are from a nurse who says that she has Jonathan. That Jonathan seems like he's been through a lot and really just needs Mina. So Mina's like, all right, nice, let's go. I know where my fiance is. I know he's alive, but he's like gone through some shit, so I'm gonna go be with him. Which, it makes us a little nervous because that means Lucy's just, again, her mom is really sick. Her mom can't keep her from sleepwalking, right? So Lucy, who we know has probably been redacted by a redacted, that probably somebody probably did something to that neck, dudes. She's gonna be left on her own, basically. The last part that we read, the very last part of the chapter, is Dr. Seward, who works... Oh, shoot, that was the warning. I was like, there is a warning I'm forgetting to put on here. I will add it now. I remember we were trying to figure out how to phrase it. But basically, Dr. Seward works at essentially an asylum, and has a man named Renfield. Renfield is like psychically connected to Dracula. We don't understand why, but Renfield knew when Dracula landed. Renfield references to him as his master. When Dracula lands, he breaks out of the asylum and runs to, I think, a church? I don't know, something like that. It's Dr. Seward fucking beast modes, rips off all of his clothes like Jason, not for real. Just pretend with me. Basically just chases after him and manages to get him and bring him back. But we know that he essentially, for whatever reason, serves Dracula. We know that. Dr. Seward is also one of the dudes who's obsessed with Mina. And every single section that is Dr. Seward ends with him being like, I mean, life sucks, but it's probably because Mina said no. I'd probably be a lot happier if Mina said yes, but what are you gonna do? Anywho, okay. So the other warning that I wanted to add on to here was oh my god, how did we put it before? The way that they talk about mental illness in this book, the way that Dr. Seward and other characters talk about it, it is very period specific, but I don't remember how we put it in the warnings. Once we've done this, once I've added this, we can get started on the actual reading, dude. Yeah, maybe... I'm putting period-specific ableism and harmful references to mental health. I don't think period-specific needs to be in that. Obviously, it's period-specific. It's an old fucking book. Ableism and harmful references to mental health, I think, is just fine. Racism is already on there. Racism is... yeah. Okay. Great. Shall we begin? We pick up with chapter 9, my friends. Letter from Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra, Budapest, August 24th.
My dearest Lucy, I know you will be anxious to hear all that has happened since we parted at the railway station at Whitby. Well, my dear, I got to Hull all right, and caught the boat to Hamburg, and then the train on here. I feel that I can hardly recall anything of the journey except that I knew I was coming to Jonathan, and that, as I should have to do some nursing, I had better get all that sleep that I could. I found my dear one. Oh, he's so thin and pale and weak-looking. All the resolution out of his dear eyes, and that quiet dignity I told you was in his face, it's just vanished. He's only a wreck of himself. He doesn't remember anything that's happened to him for a long time past. At least, he wants me to believe so. And, well, I shall never ask. He's had some terrible shock, and I fear it might tax his poor brain if he were to try to recall it. Sister Agatha, who is a good creature and a born nurse, tells me he raved of dreadful things whilst he was off his head. I wanted her to tell me what they were. She would only cross herself and say that she would never tell, that the ravings of the sick were the secrets of God, and that if a nurse through her vocation should hear them, she should respect that trust. She is a sweet and good soul, and the next day when she saw I was troubled, she opened up the subject again, and after saying that she could never mention what my poor dear raved about, added, I can tell you this much, my dear. It was not about anything which he has done wrong himself.
I can swap to NPC. No, that's the wrong one. He ain't done nothing wrong himself. What are you doing here? Okay, this guy. It took exactly 0 seconds for me to fuck up. Okay. Yeehaw, dudes. Holy shit. Okay.
And you, as his wife-to-be, have no cause to be concerned. He has not forgotten you, or what he owes to you. His fear was of great and terrible things, which no mortal can treat of. I do believe the dear soul thought I might be jealous, lest my poor dear should have fallen in love with another girl. The idea of my being jealous about Jonathan, and yet I felt a thrill of joy through me when I knew that no other woman was a cause of trouble. I'm now seated by his bedside, where I can see his face while he sleeps. And he is waking. When he woke, he asked me for his coat. He wanted to get something from the pocket. So I asked Sister Agatha. She brought all of his things, and I saw that amongst them was his notebook. I was going to ask him to let me look through it. I knew then I might find some clue to his trouble, but I suppose he must have seen my wish in my eyes. He sent me to the window, saying he wanted to be quite alone for a moment, and then he called me back, and when I came, he said to me very solemnly, Wilhelmina, I knew then he was in deadly earnest. He's never called me by that name since he asked me to marry him.
Wait. He said, You know, dear, my ideas of the trust between husband and wife,
there should be no secret, no concealment. I have had a great shock. And when I tried to think of what it is, I feel my head spin round, and I don't know if it was all real or the dreaming of a madman. You know I've had brain fever. That is to be mad. The secret's here, and I do not want to know it. I want to take up my life here, with our marriage. For my dear, we had... Wait, who's talking? Hold up. Oh, right. It's Mina. My dear, we had decided to be married as soon as the formalities are complete. Are you willing, Wilhelmina, to share my ignorance? Here is the book. Take it, keep it, read it if you will, but never let me know, unless, indeed, some solemn duty should come upon me to go back to the bitter hours, asleep or awake, sane or mad, recorded here. He fell back, exhausted, and I put the book under his pillow and kissed him. I had asked Sister Agatha to beg the Superior to let our wedding be this afternoon. I'm waiting for her reply. She's come and told me that the chaplain of the English Mission Church has been sent for, and we're to be married in an hour, or as soon as Jonathan wakes. Lucy, the time has come and gone, and I feel very solemn, but very happy. Jonathan woke a little after an hour, and all was ready, and he sat up in bed, propped up with pillows. He answered his "I will" firmly and strongly, and I could hardly speak. My heart was so full that even those words seemed to choke me. And the dear sisters were so kind. Please God, I shall never, never forget them, nor the grave and sweet responsibilities I have taken upon me. I must tell you of my wedding present. When the chaplain and the sisters had left me alone with my husband... Oh, Lucy, it's the first time I've written the words "my husband." Anywho, left me alone with my husband. I took the book from under his pillow and wrapped it up in white paper and tied it with a little bit of pale blue ribbon which was around my neck. And I sealed it over the knot with sealing wax, and for my seal I used my wedding ring. I kissed it and showed it to my husband and told him that I would keep it so. And it would be an outward and visible sign for us all our lives that we trust each other, that I would never open it, unless it were for his own dear sake or the sake of some stern duty. He took my hand in his, and, Lucy, it was the first time he took his wife's hand. He said it was the dearest thing in all the wide world, and that he would go through all the past again to win it if need be. The poor dear meant to have said a part of the past, but he can't think of time yet. I shall not wonder if at first he mixes up not only the month, but the year. Well, what could I say? I could only tell him that I was the happiest woman in all the wide world, and that I had nothing to give him except myself, my love, my trust, and that with these things went my love and duty for all the days of my life. And when he kissed me and drew me to him with his poor weak hands, it was like a solemn pledge between us. Lucy, dear, do you know why I'm telling you all this? Not only because it's all very sweet to me, but because you have been and are very dear to me. It was my privilege to be your friend and guide when you came from the schoolroom to prepare for the world of life, and I want you to see now, with the eyes of a very happy wife, whither duty has led me, so that in your own married life you may be all as happy as I am. My dear, please, Almighty God, your life may be all it promises. A long day of sunshine with no harsh winds, no forgetting duty, no distrust. I must not wish you no pain, that can never be, but I do hope you will always be as happy as I am now. Goodbye, my dear. I shall post this at once, and perhaps write you very soon again. I must stop, for Jonathan is waking, and I must attend to my husband. Your ever-loving, Mina Harker. A letter from Lucy Westenra to Mina Harker, August 30th, Whitby. My dearest Mina, oceans of love and millions of kisses, and may you soon be in your own home with your husband. I wish you could be coming home soon enough to stay with us here. The strong air would soon restore Jonathan. It has quite restored me. I have an appetite like a cormorant. I am full of life. I sleep well. You'll be glad to know that I have quite given up walking in my sleep. I think I haven't stirred out of my bed for like a week. That is when I got into it at night. Arthur says that I'm getting fat. By the way, I forgot to tell you that Arthur is here. We have such walks and drives and rides and rowing and tennis and fishing and, oh, well, I love him more than ever. He tells me that he loves me more, but I doubt that. At first, he told me that he couldn't love me more than he did then, but, that's nonsense. Oh, and he's calling me, so no more than just at present from your loving Lucy. P.S. Mother sends her love, and I think she seems better. And P.P.S. We are to be married on September 28th. Okay, bye.
Dr. Seward's diary. August 20th. The case of Renfield grows even more interesting. He has now so far quieted that there are spells of cessation from his passion. For the first week after his attack, he was perpetually violent. Then, one night, just as the moon rose, he grew quiet and kept murmuring to himself, "Now I can wait, now I can wait." The attendant came to tell me, so I ran down at once to have a look at him, and he was still in the strait waistcoat and in the padded room, but the suffused look had gone from his face, and his eyes had something of their old pleading. I might say almost cringing softness. I was satisfied with his present condition, and directed him to be relieved. The attendants hesitated, but finally carried out my wishes without protest. It was a strange thing that the patient had humor enough to see their distrust. For coming close to me, he said in a whisper, all the while looking furtively at them, "They think I could hurt you. Fancy me hurting you, the fools." It was soothing, somehow, to the feelings to find myself dissociated even in the mind of this poor madman from the others. But all the same, I do not follow his thought. Am I to take it that I have anything in common with him, so that we are, as it were, to stand together? Or has he to gain from me some good so stupendous that my well-being is needful to him? I must find out later. Tonight he will not speak. Even the offer of a kitten or even a full-grown cat will not tempt him. He will only say, "I don't take stock in cats. I have more to think about now. I can wait. I can wait." So after a while I left him. The attendant tells me that he was quiet until just before dawn, and that then he began to get uneasy, at length violent, until at last he fell into a paroxysm which exhausted him so that he swooned into a sort of coma. For 3 nights has the same thing happened, violent all day, then quiet from moonrise to sunrise. I wish I could get clues to the cause. It would almost seem as though some influence come and went. Happy thought. We shall tonight play sane wits against mad ones. He escaped before without our help. Tonight he shall escape with it. We shall give him a chance, and have the men ready to follow in case they are required. August 23rd. The unexpected always happens. How well Disraeli knew life. Our bird, when he found the cage open, would not fly, so all our subtle arrangements were for naught. At any rate, we have proved one thing, that the spells of quietness last a reasonable time. We shall in future be able to ease his bonds for a few hours each day. I have been given orders to the night attendant merely to shut him in the padded room when once he is quiet until an hour before sunrise. The poor soul's body will enjoy the relief, even if his mind cannot appreciate it. And hark, the unexpected again. I am called. The patient has once more escaped. Later, another night adventure. Renfield artfully waited until the attendant was entering the room to inspect, and then he dashed out past him and flew down the passage. I sent word for the attendants to follow, and again he went into the grounds of the deserted house. We found him in the same place, pressed against the old chapel door. When he saw me, he became furious, and had not the attendant seized him in time, he would have tried to kill me. As we were holding him, a strange thing happened. He suddenly redoubled his efforts, and then as suddenly grew calm. I looked around instinctively, but I could not see anything, and then I caught the patient's eye, and I followed it. I could trace nothing as it looked into the moonlit sky except a big bat flapping its silent, ghostly way to the west. Bats usually wheel and flit about. This one seemed to go straight on, as if it knew where it was bound for, or had some intention of its own. The patient grew calmer every instant, and presently said, "You needn't tie me, I'll go quietly." without trouble, we came back to the house. I feel there is something ominous in his calm. I shall not forget this night. Lucy Westenra's Diary, August 24th, Hillingham.
I must imitate Mina and keep writing things down, and then we can have long talks when we meet. I wonder when it will be. I wish you were here with me again. I feel so unhappy. Last night I seemed to be dreaming again, just as I was in Whitby. I don't know, perhaps it's the change of air or like getting home again. It's like all dark and horrid for me. I can't remember anything, but I am full of vague fear and like I feel super weak and worn out. And when Arthur came to lunch, he looked quite grieved when he saw me. I hadn't the spirit to try to like be cheerful or whatever. I wonder if I could sleep in Mother's room tonight. I'll make an excuse and try.
August 25th.
Another bad night. Mother didn't seem to take my proposal. She seems not too well herself, and doubtless she doesn't want to worry me, so I tried to keep awake. I succeeded for a little while, but when the clock struck 12, it woke me up from my dozing, so I guess I must have fallen asleep. There was a sort of scratching or flapping at the window, but I don't know, I ignored it. I don't remember it. I suppose I must have then fallen asleep, and then I had more bad dreams. Ugh, I wish I could remember them. This morning I'm just like so horribly weak, and my face is like pale, and my throat hurts. Maybe there's something wrong with my lungs. I don't seem ever to get enough air, you know? I'll try to cheer up when Arthur comes, or else he'll be miserable to see me.
A letter from Arthur. Sorry. A letter from Arthur Homewood to Dr. Seward. My dear Jack, I want you to do me a favor. Lucy is ill. That is, she has no special disease, but she looks awful and is getting worse every day. I've asked her if there's a cause. I don't dare ask her mother, for to disturb the poor lady's mind about her daughter in her present state of health would be fatal. Mrs. Westenra has confided to me that her doom is spoken, disease of the heart, though poor Lucy does not know it yet. I'm sure there's something preying on my dear girl's mind. I'm almost distracted when I think of her. To look at her gives me a pang. I told her I should ask you to see her, and though she demurred at first, I know why, old fellow, she finally consented, and it would be a painful task for you, I know, but it's for her sake, and I must not hesitate to ask, or for you to act. You are to come to lunch at Hillingham tomorrow, 2 o'clock, so as not to arouse any suspicion in Mrs. Westenra. After lunch, Lucy will take an opportunity of being alone with you, and I'll come in for tea, and we can go away together. I'm filled with anxiety. I want to consult with you alone as soon as I can after you've seen her. Do not fail. Arthur. Telegram from Arthur Homewood to Dr. Seward. I am summoned to see my father, who is worse. Am writing. Write me fully by tonight. Post to ring. Wire me, if necessary. A letter from Dr. Seward to Arthur Homewood. My dear old fellow, with regard to Miss Westenra's health, I hasten to let you know at once that in my opinion there is not any functional disturbance or any malady that I know of. At the same time, I am not by any means satisfied with her appearance. She is woefully different from what she was when I saw her last. Of course, you must bear in mind that I did not have full opportunity of examination such as I would wish. Our very friendship makes a little difficulty which not even medical science or custom can bridge over. I had better tell you exactly what happened, leaving you to draw in a measure your own conclusions. I shall then say what I have done and propose doing. I found Miss Westenra in seemingly gay spirits. Her mother was present. In a few seconds I made up my mind that she was trying all she knew to mislead her mother and prevent her from being anxious. I have no doubt she guesses, if she does not know, what need of caution there is. We lunched alone, and as we all exerted ourselves to be cheerful, we got, as some kind of reward for our labors, real cheerfulness amongst us, and then Miss Westenra went to lie down, and Lucy was left with me. We went into her boudoir, and till we got there her gaiety remained, for the servants were coming and going. As soon as the door was closed, however, the mask fell from her face, and she sank into a chair with a great sigh and hid her eyes with her hand. When I saw that her high spirits had failed, I at once took advantage of her reaction to make a diagnosis. She said to me, very sweetly, "I cannot tell you how I loathe talking about myself." I reminded her that the doctor's confidence was sacred, but that you were grievously anxious about her. She caught on to my meaning at once and settled that matter in a word. "Tell Arthur everything you want. I don't care about myself. It's all for him." So I suppose I am quite free. I could easily see she is somewhat bloodless. I could not see the usual anemic signs. By a chance, I was actually able to test the quality of her blood, for in opening a window which was stiff, a cord gave way, and she cut her hand slightly with broken glass. It was a slight matter in itself, but it gave me an evident chance, and I secured a few drops of the blood and have analyzed them. The qualitative analysis gives a quite normal condition and shows, I should infer, in itself a vigorous state of health. In other physical matters, I was quite satisfied that there is no need for anxiety, but as there must be a cause somewhere, I have come to the conclusion that it must be something mental. She complains of difficulty in breathing satisfactorily at times, of heavy, lethargic sleep with dreams that frighten her, but regarding which she can remember nothing. She says that as a child she used to walk in her sleep, and that when in Whitby the habit came back, that once she walked out in the night and went to East Cliff where Miss Murray found her, but she assures me that of late the habit has not returned. I'm in doubt. I've done the best thing I know of. I've written to my old friend and master, Professor Van Helsing of Amsterdam, who knows as much about obscure diseases as anyone in the world. I've asked him to come over, and as you told me that all things were to be in your charge, I have mentioned to him who you are and your relations to Miss Westenra. This, my dear fellow, is in obedience to your wishes, for I am only too proud and happy to do anything I can for her. Van Helsing would, I know, do anything for me for a personal reason, so no matter on what ground he comes, we must accept his wishes. He is a seemingly arbitrary man, but this because he knows what he's talking about better than anyone else. He is a philosopher and a metaphysician, and one of the most advanced scientists of his day. He has, I believe, an absolutely open mind. This with an iron nerve, a temper of the icebrook, an indomitable resolution, self-command, and toleration exalted from virtues to blessings, the kindliest, truest heart that beats. These form his equipment for the noble work that he's doing for mankind, work both in theory and practice, for his views are as wide as his all-embracing sympathy. I tell you these facts that you may know why I have such confidence in him. I have asked him to come at once. I shall see Miss Westenra tomorrow again. She is to meet me at the stores, so that I may not alarm her mother by too early a repetition of my call. Yours always, John Seward. A letter from Abraham Van Helsing, M.D., D.Ph.D. Lit, etc., etc., to Dr. Seward. My good friend, when I have received your letter, I am already coming to you. By good fortune, I can leave just at once, without wrong to any of those who have trusted me. Were fortune other, then it were bad for those who have trusted, for I come to my friend when he call me to aid those he holds dear. Tell your friend that when that time you suck from my wound so swiftly the poison of the gangrene from the knife that our other friend too nervous let slip, you did more for him than he wants my aids, and you call for them than all his great fortune could do. But it is pleasure added to do for him, your friend. It is to you that I come. Have then rooms for me at the Great Eastern Hotels, that I may be near to hand, and please it so arrange that we may see the young lady not too late on tomorrow, for it is likely that I may have to return here that night. But if need be, I shall come again in 3 days and stay longer if must. Till then, goodbye, my friend John Van Helsing. Letter from Dr. Seward to Arthur Homewood. My dear Art, Van Helsing has come and gone. He came on with me to Hillingham and found that by Lucy's discretion her mother was lunching out, so we were alone with her. Van Helsing made a very careful examination of the patient. He's to report to me, and I shall advise you, for, of course, I was not present all the time. He is, I fear, much concerned. He says he must think. When I told him of our friendship and how you trust me in the matter, he said, you must tell him all that you think. Tell him what I think, if you can guess it, if you will. I am not jesting. This is no jest, but life and death, perhaps more. I asked what he meant by that. He was very serious. This was when we had come back to town, and he was having a cup of tea before starting on his return to Amsterdam. He would not give me any further clue. Please don't be angry with me, Art. His very reticence means that all his brains are working for her good. He will speak plainly enough when the time comes, to be sure. I told him I would simply write an account of our visit, just as if I were doing a descriptive special article for the Daily Telegraph. He seemed not to notice, but remarked that the smuts in London were not quite so bad as they used to be when he was a student here. I am to get his report tomorrow, if he can possibly make it. In any case, I am to have a letter. As to the visit, Lucy was more cheerful than on the day I first saw her, certainly looked better. She had lost something of the ghastly look that so upset her, and her breathing was normal. She was very sweet to the professor, as she always is, and tried to make him feel at ease, though I could see that the poor girl was making a hard struggle for it. I believe Van Helsing saw it too. I saw the quick look under his bushy brows that I knew of old. He began to chat of all things except ourselves and diseases, and with such an infinite geniality I could see poor Lucy's pretense of animation merge into reality. And then, without any seeming change, he brought the conversation gently around to his visit, and suavely said, this one? Yep.
My dear young miss, I have the so great pleasure, because you are so much beloved. That is much, my dear, ever were there that which I do not see. They told me you were down in the spirit, that you were of ghastly pale. To them I say, pfft.
He snapped his fingers at me, and went on,
But you and I shall show them how wrong they are. How can
he, and he pointed at me with the same look and gesture as that with once he had pointed me out in his class, on or rather after a particular occasion which he never fails to remind me of,
know anything of a young lady? He has his madams to play with and bring them back to happiness, and to those that love him. It is much to do, and oh, but there are rewards, and that we can bestow such happiness. But the young ladies, oh, he has no wife, no daughter.
God damn, he's really going in on him.
He has no wife, no daughter. The young do not tell themselves to the young, to the old, like me, who have known so many sorrows and the causes of them. So, my dear, we will send him away to smoke a cigarette in the garden, whilst you and I have a little talk all to ourselves.
Well, I took the hint and strolled about, and presently the professor came to the window and called me in. He looked grave, but said,
I have made careful examination. There is no functional cause. With you I agree. There has been much blood lost. It has been, but is not. The conditions of her are no way anemic. I have asked her to send me her maid, that I may ask just one or two questions, that so I may not chance to miss nothing. I know well what she will say, and yet there is cause. There is always cause for everything, and I must go back home and think. You must send to me the telegram every day. If there be cause, I shall come again. The disease, for not to be all well is a disease. It interests me, and the sweet young dear, she interests me too. She charms me, and for her, if not for you or disease, I will come.
As I tell you, he would not say a word more, even when we were alone. And so now, Art, you know all that I know, and I'll keep stern watch. I trust your poor father is rallying. It must be a terrible thing to you, my dear fellow, to be placed in such a position between two people who are both so dear to you. I know your idea of duty to your father, and you're right to stick to it, but if need be, I shall send you word to come at once to Lucy. Do not be over-anxious unless you hear from me. Dr. Seward Diary on September 4th. Zoophagus patient still keeps up our interest in him. He had only one outburst, and that was yesterday at an unusual time. Just before the stroke of noon, he began to grow restless. The attendant knew the symptoms and at once summoned aid. Fortunately, the men came at a run, and were just in time, for at the stroke of noon he became so violent it took all their strength to hold him. In about 5 minutes, however, he began to get more and more quiet, and finally sank into a sort of melancholy, in which state he has remained up until now. The attendant tells me his screams whilst in the paroxysm were really appalling. I found my hands full when I got in, attending to some of the other patients who were frightened by him. Indeed, I can quite understand the effect. The sounds disturbed even me, though I was some distance away. It is now after the dinner hour of the asylum, and as yet my patient sits in a corner brooding, with a dull, sullen, woe-begone look in his eyes. It seems rather to indicate than to show something directly. I cannot quite understand it. Another change in my patient. At 5 o'clock I looked in on him and found him seemingly as happy and content as he used to be. Catching flies, eating them, keeping notes of his capture by making nail marks on the edge of the door between the ridges of padding, and when he saw me he came over and apologized for his bad conduct and asked me in a very humble, cringing way to be led back to his own room, to have his notebook again. I thought it well to humor him. He's back in his room, with the window open. He has the sugar of his tea spread out on the windowsill and is reaping quite a harvest of flies. He is not now eating them, but putting them in a box, as of old, and is already examining the corners of his room to find spiders. I tried to get him to talk about the past few days. For any clue to his thoughts, it would be of immense help to me, but he would not rise. For a moment or two he looked very sad and said in a sort of faraway voice, as though saying it rather to himself than to me,
All over. It's all over. Oh, he's deserted me. No hope for me now unless I do it for myself.
And then, suddenly turning to me in a resolute way, he said,
Doctor, will you be very good to me and let me have just a little more sugar? I think it would be good for me.
And the flies? I said.
Yeah, the flies like it too, and I like the flies, and so I like it.
There are people who know so little as to think that madmen do not argue. I procured him a double supply and left him as happy a man as, I suppose, any in the world. I wish I could understand his mind. At midnight, another change in him. I had been to see Miss Westenra, whom I found much better, and had just returned. I was standing at our gate looking at the sunset when once more I heard him yelling. As his room is on the side of the house, I could hear it better than in the morning. It was a shock to me to turn from the wonderful smoky beauty of the sunset over London with its lurid lights and inky shadows and all the marvelous tints that come on foul clouds, even on foul water, and to realize all the grim sternness of my own cold stone building, with its wealth of breathing misery and my own desolate heart to endure it all. I reached him just as the sun was going down, and from his window saw the red disk sink. As it sank, he became less and less frenzied, and just as it dipped, he slid from the hands that held him, an inert mass on the floor. It is wonderful, however, what intellectual recuperative power lunatics have, for within a few minutes he stood up quite calmly and looked around. I signaled to the attendants not to hold him. I was anxious to see what he would do. He went straight to the window, brushed away the crumbs of sugar, took his fly box and emptied it outside, threw away the box, shut the window, and crossed over, sitting down on his bed. This all surprised me, so I asked, "Are you not going to keep the flies anymore?"
No, said he. I'm sick of all that rubbish.
Well, he certainly is a wonderfully interesting study. I wish I could get some glimpse of his mind or of the cause of his sudden passion and how it stopped. There may be a clue in that after all, if we can find why today his paroxysms came on at high noon and at sunset. Can it be that there is a malign influence of the sun at periods which affects certain natures? Maybe as at times the moon does others. We shall see. A telegram from Seward in London to Van Helsing in Amsterdam. Amsterdam! Yeah, baby! Okay, sorry. September 4th. Patient better today. September 5th. Patient greatly improved. Good appetite, sleeps naturally, good spirits. Color is coming back. September 6th. A terrible change for the worse. Come at once. Do not lose an hour. I hold over telegram to Homewood till I have seen you. End chapter 9. So, Lucy. She got really bad when they were in Whitby, and then she got better. Came to London. Started to not feel so good again. And is now feeling bad. Missing blood, but not anemic. How interesting. How curious. Her throat hurts all the time. How weird. That's so strange. We'll take a couple-minute break if any of you need to pee or anything. My phone was lighting up like crazy while I was reading that, so let me check this really quick. All right. We Gucci. Maybe it's tonsillitis. Maybe it's tonsillitis, guys. I don't know, just a thought. And also, Mina and Jonathan are married. And she really wants to know what happened to him, but has made a vow to not read his notebook. As a gesture, saying that she trusts him, and if he doesn't want her to read it, or thinks it would not be beneficial to read it, then she won't. So she'll probably never know anything, you know? She probably won't be involved in the story. That's for the best. She and Jonathan are probably just gonna be fine and not involved. I'm happy for them. Good for them. I can't believe Keanu Reeves was only in the beginning of the Dracula movie. That's pretty wild. Yum, 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 yum. Yeah, you know, they deserve to just like chill in Budapest. All right. You ready for chapter 10? We got more of the good doctor. To the Honorable Arthur Homewood. All right, let's go. Chapter 10. A letter from Dr. Seward to the Honorable Arthur Homewood. My dear Art, my news today is not so good. Lucy this morning has gone back a bit. There is, however, one good thing which has arisen from it. Mrs. Westenra was naturally anxious concerning Lucy and has consulted me professionally about her. I took advantage of the opportunity and told her that my old Master Van Helsing, the great specialist, was coming to stay with me, that I would put her in his charge conjointly with myself. Now we can come and go without alarming her, for a shock to her would mean sudden death, and this in Lucy's weak condition might be disastrous. We're hedged in with difficulties, all of us, my poor old fellow, but please, God, we shall come through them all right. If any need, I shall write, so that if you do not hear from me, take it for granted I am simply waiting for news. In haste, yours ever, John Seward. Dr. Seward's Diary, September 7th. The first thing Van Helsing said to me when we met in Liverpool Street was,
"Have you ever said anything to our young friend, the lover?"
"No," I said. "I waited till I had seen you. As I said in my telegram, I wrote him a letter simply telling him that you were coming, as Miss Westenra was not so well, and that I should let him know if need be."
"Right, my friend," he said. "Quite right. Better he not know as yet. Perhaps he shall never know. I pray so. But if it be needed, then he shall know all. And, my good friend John, let me caution you, you deal with the madmen. All men are mad in some way or another, and inasmuch as you deal discreetly with your madmen, so deal with God's madmen too, the rest of the world. You tell not your madmen what you do, nor why you do it. You tell them not what you think. So you shall keep knowledge in its place, where it may rest, where it may gather its kind around it and breed. You and I, we shall keep as yet what we know here and here." He touched me on the heart and on the forehead, and then touched himself the same way. "I have for myself thoughts at the present, and later I shall unfold them to you." "Why not now?" I asked. "It may do some good. We may arrive at some decision." He stopped and looked at me and said, "My friend John, when the corn is grown even before it has ripened, while the milk of its mother earth is in him, and the sunshine has not yet begun to paint him with gold and husbandmen, he pull the ear and rub him between his rough hands and blow away the green chaff and say to you, 'Look, he is good corn!' He will make good crop when the time comes." I did not see the application, and I told him so. For a reply, he reached over and took my ear in his hand and pulled it playfully as he used to long ago at lectures, and said, "The good husbandman tells you so then because he knows, but not till then. You do not find the good husbandman digging up his planted corn to see if it grew. That is for the children who play at husbandry, and not for those who take it as the work of their life. See you now, friend John, I've sown my corn, and nature has her work to do in making it sprout. If he sprout at all, there's some promise, and I wait till the ear begins to swell." He broke off. He evidently saw that I was starting to understand. Then he went on very gravely. "You were always a careful student. Your casebook was ever more full than the rest. But you were only student then. Now you are master. I trust that good habit has not failed. Remember, my friend, knowledge is stronger than memory. We should not trust the weaker. Even if you have not kept the good practice, let me tell you that this case of our dear miss is one that may be, mind, I say may be, of such interest to us and others that all the rest may not make him kick the beam, as your people say. Take then good note of it. Nothing is too small, I counsel you. Put down in record even your doubts and surmises. Hereafter it may be of interest to you to see how true you guess. We learn from failure, not from success." When I described Lucy's symptoms, the same as before but infinitely more marked, he looked grave, but said nothing. He took with him a bag, in which there were many instruments and drugs, the ghastly paraphernalia of our beneficial trade, as he once called it in one of his lectures, the equipment of a professor, and of the healing craft. When we were shown in, Mrs. Westenra met us, and she was alarmed, but not nearly so much as I expected to find her. Nature is one of her beneficent moods. Nature in one of her beneficent moods has ordained that even death has some antidote to its own terrors. Here, in a case where any shock may prove fatal, matters are so ordered that from some cause or another, the things not personal, even the terrible change in her daughter, to whom she is so attached, do not seem to reach her. It is something like the way Dame Nature gathers round a foreign body an envelope of some insensitive tissue which can protect from evil that which it would otherwise harm by contact. If this be an ordered selfishness, then we should pause before we condemn anyone for the vice of egoism. There may be deeper root for its cause than we have knowledge of. I used my knowledge of this phase of spiritual pathology and laid down a rule that she should not be present with Lucy, or think of her illness more than was absolutely required. She assented readily, so readily I saw again the hand of nature fighting for life. Van Helsing and I were shown up to Lucy's room, and if I was shocked when I saw her yesterday, I was horrified when I saw her today. She was ghastly, chalkily pale. The red seemed to have gone even from her lips and gums, and the bones of her face stood out prominently, her breathing painful to see and hear. Van Helsing's face grew set as marble. His eyebrows converged till they almost touched over his nose. Lucy lay motionless and did not seem to have strength to speak, so for a while we were silent. Van Helsing beckoned to me, and we went gently out of the room. The instant we closed the door, he stepped quickly along the passage to the next door, which was opened, and pulled me in quickly with him and closed the door. "My God!" he said. "This is dreadful! There is no time to be lost. She will die for sheer want of blood to keep the heart's action as it should be. There must be transfusion of blood at once. Is it you, or is it me?" "I am younger and stronger, Professor. It must be me." "Then get ready at once. I will bring my bag. I am prepared." I went downstairs with him, and as we were going, there was a knock at the hall door. When we reached the hall, the maid had just opened the door, and Arthur was stepping quickly in. He rushed up to me, saying in an eager whisper, "Jack, I was so anxious. I read between the lines of your letter and have been in agony. The dad was better, so I ran down here to see for myself. Is not that gentleman Dr. Van Helsing? I'm so thankful to you, sir, for coming. When first... Oops, wrong character. Come back. When first...
Oh my god. He's here. Don't worry about blood types, guys. It's fine. Everything's fine. Oh my god, where even was I? When first the professor's eye had lit upon him, he had been angry at his interruption at such a time, but now, as he took in his stalwart proportions and recognized the strong young manhood which seemed to emanate from him, his eyes gleamed. Without a pause, he said to him gravely, as he held out his hand,
"Sir, you have come in time. You are the lover of our dear miss. She is bad, very, very bad. Nay, my child, do not go like that."
He suddenly grew pale and sat down in a chair, almost fainting.
"You are to help her. You can do more than any that live. Your courage is your best help."
What can I do?" asked Arthur hoarsely. "Tell me, I shall do it. My life is hers. I would give the last drop of blood in my body for her." The professor has a strongly humorous side. I could from old knowledge detect a trace of its origin in his answer.
"My young sir, I do not ask so much as that. Not the last."
"Well, what shall I do?" There was fire in his eyes, his open nostrils quivering with intent.
Van Helsing slapped him on the shoulder. "Come," he said. "You are a man, and it is a man we want. You are better than me, better than my friend John."
Arthur looked bewildered. The professor went on by explaining in a kindly way.
"Your young miss is bad. Very bad. She wants blood. Blood she must have or will die. My friend John and I have consulted, and we are to perform what we call a transfusion of blood, to transfer from full veins of one to the empty veins which pine. John was to give his blood. He is the more young and strong than me." Here Arthur took my hand and wrung it in hard silence. "But now you are here. You are more good than us, old or young, who toil much in the world of thought. Our nerves are not so calm, our blood not so bright."
Arthur turned to him and said, "If you only knew how gladly I would die for her, you would understand." He stopped, with a sort of choke in his voice.
"Good boy,"
said Van Helsing.
"In the not so far off you will be happy that you have done all you can for her that you love. Come now, and be silent. You shall kiss her once before it is done, but then you must go, and you must leave at my sign. Say no word to Madame. You know how it is with her. There must be no shock. Any knowledge of this would be one. Come!"
We all went to Lucy's room. Arthur, by direction, remained outside. Lucy turned her head and looked at us, but said nothing. She was not asleep, but she was simply too weak to make the effort. Her eyes spoke to us, and that was all. Van Helsing took some things from his bag and laid them on a little table out of sight. He mixed a narcotic, and coming to the bed said cheerily,
"Now, little miss, this is your medicine. Drink it off like a good child. See, I lift you so that you may swallow it easy. Yes."
She made the effort, with success, and it astonished me how long the drug took to act. This, in fact, marked the extent of her weakness. The time seemed endless, until sleep began to flicker in her eyelids, and at last, however, the narcotic began to manifest its potency, and she fell into a deep sleep. When the professor was satisfied, he called Arthur into the room and bade him strip off his coat.
Then he added, "You may take that one kiss whilst I bring over the table. Friend John, help to me."
Neither of us looked while he bent over her. Van Helsing turned to me.
"He is young and strong, and of blood so pure we need not defibrinate it."
With swiftness, but with absolute method, Van Helsing performed the operation. As the transfusion went on, something like life seemed to come back to poor Lucy's cheeks, and through Arthur's growing pallor, the joy of his face seemed absolutely to shine. After a bit, I began to grow anxious. The loss of blood was telling on Arthur. Strong man as he was, it gave me an idea of what a terrible strain Lucy's system must have undergone. That, what weakened Arthur, only partially restored her. The professor's face was set, and he stood watch in hand, with his eyes fixed now on the patient and Arthur. I could hear my own heart beating, and presently he said in a soft voice,
"Do not stir an instant. It is enough. You attend him, and I will look to her."
When all was over, I could see how much Arthur was weakened. I dressed the wound. I took his arm to bring him away. And when Van Helsing spoke without turning round, the man seemed to have eyes in the back of his head.
"The brave lover, I think, deserves another kiss, which he shall have presently."
As he had now finished his operation, he adjusted the pillow of the patient's head. As he did so, the narrow black velvet band which she seemed always to wear around her throat buckled with an old diamond buckle which her lover had given her, and was dragged up and showed a red mark on her throat. Arthur did not notice, but I could hear the deep hiss of indrawn breath, which is one of Van Helsing's ways of betraying emotion. He said nothing, but turned to me, saying, "Now, take down our brave young lover, give him the port wine, let him lie down a while. He must then go home and rest. Sleep much, eat much, that he may be recruited of what he has given to his love. He must not stay here. Hold a moment, I may take it, sir, that you are anxious of result. Then bring it with you in all ways the operation is successful. You have saved her life this time, and you can go home and rest easy in mind that all that can be is. I shall tell her all when she is well. She shall love you none the less for what you have done. So, goodbye." When Arthur had gone, it's quick. When Arthur had gone, bye. When Arthur had gone, I went back to the room. Lucy was sleeping gently. Her breathing was stronger, and I could see the counterpane move as her breast heaved. By the bedside sat Van Helsing, looking at her intently, the velvet band covering the red mark. I asked the professor, in a whisper, "What do you make of the mark on her throat?"
"What do you make of it?"
"Well, I have not examined it yet," I answered. And then and there proceeded to loose the band. Just over the external jugular vein there were 2 punctures, not large, but not wholesome looking. There was no sign of disease, but the edges were white and worn, as if by some trituration. It at once occurred to me that this wound, or whatever it was, might be the means of the manifest loss of blood, but I abandoned the idea as soon as it formed. Such a thing couldn't be. The whole bed would have been drenched to a scarlet with the blood the girl must have lost to leave such a pallor as she had before the transfusion.
"Well?"
said Van Helsing. "Well," said I can make nothing of it." The professor stood.
"I must go back to Amsterdam tonight," he said. "There are books and things that I want. You must remain here all the night. You must not let your sight pass from her."
"Shall I have a nurse?" I asked.
"We are the best nurses, you and I. You keep watch all night, see that she is well fed, that nothing disturbs her. You must not sleep all the night. Later on we can sleep, you and I shall be back as soon as possible, and then we may begin."
"May begin?" I said. "What on earth do you mean?"
"We shall see,"
he answered, and he hurried out. He came back a moment later and put his head inside the door and said with a warning finger held up, "Remember, she is in your charge, and if you leave her and harm befall, you shall not sleep easy hereafter." Whew, what a whirlwind. Dr. Seward's diary, September 8th. I sat up all night with Lucy. The opiate worked itself off toward dusk, and she waked naturally. She looked a different being from what she had been before the operation. Her spirits even were good. She was full of a happy vivacity, but I could see evidence of the absolute prostration with which she had undergone. When I told Mrs. Westenra that Dr. Van Helsing had directed that I should sit up with her, she almost pooh-poohed the idea, pointing out her daughter's renewed strength and excellent spirits. I was firm, however, and made preparations for my long vigil. When her maid had prepared her for the night, I came in, having in the meantime had supper, and took a seat by the bedside. She did not in any way make an objection, but looked at me gratefully whenever I caught her eye. After a long spell, she seemed to sink off to sleep, but with an effort seemed to pull herself together and shake it off. This repeated several times, with greater effort and shorter pause as the time moved. It was apparent that she did not want to sleep. I tackled the subject at once. "You don't want to go to sleep?" "No, I'm afraid." "Afraid to go to sleep? Why so? It is the boon we all crave." "Not if you're like me. If sleep was to you a passage of horror." "A presage of horror? What on earth do you mean?" "Oh, I don't know. That's what's so terrible. Like, all of this stuff, all of this weakness, it comes to me in my sleep. So I dread the very thought of it." "But, my dear girl, you may sleep tonight. I'm here. I'm watching you. I promise nothing will happen." "Well, I do trust you." I seized the opportunity and said, "I promise. If I see any evidence of a bad dream, I will wake you at once." "You will? Will you? Seriously? You are so good to me. Okay, I'll sleep then." And almost at the word, gave a deep sigh of relief and sank back asleep. That was easy. All night long, I watched by her. She never stirred, but slept on in a deep, tranquil, life-giving, health-giving sleep. Her lips were slightly parted, her breast rose and fell with the regularity of a pendulum. There was a smile on her face, and it was evident that no bad dreams had come to disturb her peace of mind. In the early morning, her maid came, and I left her in care and took myself back home. I was anxious about many things. I sent a short wire to Van Helsing and to Arthur, telling them of the excellent result of the operation. My own work, with its manifold arrears, took me all day to clear off. It was dark when I was able to inquire about my Zupageous patient. The report was good. He had been quiet for the past day and night. A telegram came from Van Helsing at Amsterdam whilst I was at dinner, suggesting that I should be at Hillingham tonight. It might well be at hand, and stating that he was leaving by the night mail and would join me early in the morning. September 9th. I was pretty tired and worn out when I got to Hillingham. For 2 nights I had hardly had a wink of sleep, and my brain was beginning to feel that numbness which marks cerebral exhaustion. Lucy was up in cheerful spirits, and when she shook hands with me, she looked sharply in my face and said, "No sitting up tonight for you. You are soups worn out." "I'm well indeed. I am. And if there is to be any sitting up, it's I who will sit up with you." I would not argue the point, but went and had my supper. Lucy came with me, and, enlivened by her charming presence, I made an excellent meal and had a couple glasses of the more than excellent port. Lucy took me upstairs and showed me a room next to her own where a cozy fire burned. "Now," she said, "you have to stay here. I'll leave the door open, and my door too, and you can just, lie on the sofa. I know nothing would induce any of you doctors to go to bed whilst there's a patient above the horizon, so if I want anything, I'll call out, and you can come to me right away." I could not but acquiesce, for I was, dog-tired, quote, end quote, and could not have sat up had I tried, so, on her renewing her promise to call me if she should want for anything, I lay on the sofa and forgot about everything. Lucy Westenra's diary, September 9th. I feel, so happy tonight. I've been so miserably weak. To be able to think and move about is like feeling sunshine after a long spell of east wind out of the steel sky. Somehow Arthur feels so very close to me. It's like I feel his presence all warm around me. I suppose it's that sickness and weakness are selfish things and turn our inner eyes and sympathy on ourselves, whilst health and strength give love reign, and in thought and feeling he can wander where he will. I know where my thoughts are. If Arthur only knew. Oh, my dear, your ears must tingle as you sleep, as mine do waking. The blissful rest of last night, how I slept with that dear good Dr. Seward watching me. And tonight, I won't be afraid to sleep at all, since he's so close by. Thank everybody for being so good to me. Oh, thank God. Anyway, good night, Arthur. Dr. Seward's diary, September 10th. I was conscious of the professor's hand on my head and started awake, all in a second. That is one of the things that we learn in an asylum at any rate.
"And how is our patient?"
Dodger struggles to turn a page. There we go. Well, when I left her, or rather when she left me, I answered, "Come, let us see," he said. And together we went into the room. The blind was down, and I went over to raise it gently whilst Van Helsing stepped with his soft cat-like tread over to the bed. As I raised the blind and the morning sun flooded the room, I heard the professor's low hiss of inspiration, and knowing its rarity, a deadly fear shot through my heart. As I passed over, he moved back, and his exclamation of horror, "Gott in Himmel!" needed no enforcement from his agonized face. He raised his hand and pointed to the bed, and his iron face was drawn and ashen white. I felt my knees begin to tremble. There on the bed, seemingly in a swoon, lay poor Lucy, more horribly white and wan-looking than ever. Even the lips were white, and the gums shrunk back from the teeth, as we sometimes see on a corpse after a prolonged illness. Van Helsing raised his foot to stamp in anger, but the instinct of his life and all the long years of habit stood to him, and he put it down again softly. "Quick," he said. "Bring the brandy." I flew to the dining room and returned with the decanter. He wetted the poor white lips with it, and together we rubbed palm and wrist and heart. He felt her heart, and after a few moments of agonizing suspense said, "It is not too late. It beats, though but feebly. All our work is undone. We must begin anew. There is no young Arthur here now, and I have to call on you yourself this time, friend John." As he spoke, he was dipping into his bag and producing the instruments for transfusion. I had taken off my coat and rolled up my shirt sleeve. There was no possibility of an opiate just at present, and no need of one. And so, without a moment's delay, we began the operation. And after a time, it did not seem a short time either, for the draining away of one's blood, no matter how willingly it be given, is a terrible feeling. Van Helsing held up a warning finger.
"Do not stir," he said. "I fear that with growing strength she may wake, and that would make danger, so much danger, but I shall precaution take. I shall give hypodermic injection of morphia."
He proceeded then swiftly and deftly to carry out his intent. The effect on Lucy was not bad, for the faint seemed to merge subtly into the narcotic sleep. It was with a feeling of personal pride that I could see a tinge of color steal back into the pallid cheeks and lips. No man knows, till he experiences it, what it is to feel his own lifeblood drawn away into the veins of the woman he loves. The professor watched me critically.
"That will do,"
he said. "Already," I remonstrated. "You took a great deal more from Art," to which he smiled a sad sort of smile.
"He is her lover, her fiancé, and you have work, much work, to do for her and for others, and the present will suffice."
When we stopped the operation, he attended to Lucy whilst I applied digital pressure to my own incision. I laid down whilst I waited his leisure to attend to me, for I felt faint and sick. By and by, he bound up my wound and sent me downstairs to get a glass of wine for myself. Why does everybody drink wine after getting their blood drawn? Is that an actual thing, or was that just like an old-timey thing that they thought helped but didn't actually help? I guess wine makes your... No, I don't think it's anything. Because it was red for the sugar content. You gotta replace your red. I was just wondering if it has to do with, like, when you drink, maybe this isn't real, maybe I'm making this up. When you drink, your blood pumps faster, right? I don't know, for like circulation, I was thinking. I don't know. I prefer the idea that they just wanted to replace the red. It was a genuine thing that they believed, but then they realized it didn't actually help. Okay, great. Cool. Good info. Okay, anyways, where were we? He was getting a drink. Where was that? There it is. Alrighty, cool. Ahem. As I was leaving the room, he came after me and half whispered,
"Mind, nothing must be said of this. If our young lover should turn up unexpected as before, no word to him. It would at once frighten him and jealous him too. There must be none."
When I came back, he looked at me carefully and said,
"You are not much the worse. Go into the room, lie on your sofa, rest a while, and then have much breakfast and come here to me."
I followed out his orders, for I knew how right and wise they were. I had done my part, and now my next duty was to keep up my strength. I felt very weak, and in the weakness lost something of the amazement at what had occurred. I fell asleep on the sofa, however, wondering over and over again how Lucy had made such a retrograde movement. How she could have been drained of so much blood with no sign of anywhere to show for it. I must have continued my wonder in my dreams, for sleeping and waking, my thoughts always came back to the punctures on her throat, the ragged, exhausted appearance of the edges, tiny though they were. Lucy slept well into the day, and when she woke she was fairly well and strong, though not nearly so much as the day before. When Van Helsing had seen her, he went out for a walk, leaving me in charge, with strict injunctions that I was not to leave her for a moment. I could hear his voice in the hall, asking the way to the nearest telegraph office. Lucy chatted with me freely, and seemed quite unconscious that anything had happened. I tried to keep her amused and interested. When her mother came up to see her, she did not seem to notice any change whatsoever, but did say to me,
"We owe you so much, Dr. Seward, for all you have done, but you really must now take care of yourself, not to overwork yourself. You are looking pale. You want a wife and nurse to look after you a bit, that you do." As she spoke, Lucy turned crimson, though it was only momentarily, for her poor wasted veins could not stand for long such an unwanted drain to the head. The reaction came in excessive pallor as she turned imploring eyes on me, and I smiled and nodded and laid my finger on my lips. With a sigh, she sank back amid her pillows. Van Helsing returned in a couple of hours and presently said to me,
"Now, you go home, eat much, drink enough, make yourself strong, and I will stay here tonight. I shall sit up with my little miss myself, and you and I must watch the case. We must have none other to know. I have grave reasons. No, do not ask them. Just think what you will. Do not fear to even think the most not probable. Good night!"
In the hall, 2 of the maids came to me and asked if they or either of them might not sit up this time with Miss Lucy. They implored me to let them, and when I said it was Dr. Van Helsing's wish that either he or I should sit up, they asked me quite piteously to intercede with the foreign gentleman. I was much touched by their kindness. Perhaps it is because I am weak at present, perhaps because it was on Lucy's account that their devotion was manifested. Over and over again have I seen similar instances of woman's kindness. I got back here in time for a late dinner, went my rounds, and all is well. I set this down whilst waiting for sleep, for it is coming. September 11th. This afternoon I went to Hillingham. I found Van Helsing in excellent spirits, and Lucy much better. Shortly after I had arrived, a big parcel from abroad came for the professor. He opened it with much impressment, assumed, of course, and showed a great bundle of white flowers.
"These are for you, Miss Lucy," he said.
"For me? Dr. Van Helsing?"
"Yes, my dear, but not for you to play with. They are medicine."
Here Lucy made a wry face.
"Nay, but they are not to take in a decoction or a noxious form. So you need not snub that so charming nose, or I shall point out to my friend Arthur what woes he may have to endure in seeing so much beauty that he loves so distorted. My pretty miss, that bring this not-so-nice nose all straight again. This is medicinal, but you need not know how. I put him in your window, I make pretty wreath, I hang him around your neck, so that you may sleep well, yes. They, like the lotus flower, make your troubles forgotten. It smells so like the waters of Lethe, and of the fountain of youth, that the conquistadors sought for it in the Floridas, and found him all too late."
Whilst he was speaking, Lucy had been examining the flowers, smelling them, and now she threw them down, saying with half laughter, half disgust, "Professor, you're only putting up a joke. The flowers are like garlic." To my surprise, Van Helsing rose up and said with all his sternness, his iron jaw set, his bushy eyebrows meeting,
"No trifling with me. I never jest. There is grim purpose in all that I do, and I warn you that you do not thwart me. Take care for the sake of others as not for your own."
Seeing poor Lucy scared, as she might well be, he went on more gently.
"Little miss, my dear, do not fear me. I only do for your good. There is much virtue to you in those such common flowers. I place them myself in your room. I make myself the wreath that you are to wear, but hush! No telling to others what makes so inquisitive questions. We must obey. Silence is part of obedience, and obedience is to bring you strong and well into loving arms that wait for you. Sit still a while. Come with me, friend John, and you shall help me deck the room with my garlic, which is all the way from Harlem, where my friend Vanderpool raised herb in his glass houses all year. I had to telegraph yesterday, or they would not have been here."
We went into the room, taking flowers with us. The professor's actions were certainly odd, not to be found in any pharmacopoeia that I had ever heard of. First, he fastened up the windows and latched them securely, and next, taking a handful of flowers, rubbed them all over the sashes as though to ensure that every whiff of air might get in would be laden with a garlic smell. With the wisp he rubbed all over the jamb of the door, above, below, at each side, round the fireplace in the same way. It all seemed grotesque to me. Presently I said, "Well, Professor, I know you always have a reason for what you do, but this does puzzle me. It is well we have no skeptic here, or he would say that you were working some spell to keep out an evil spirit."
"Ha! Perhaps I am!"
he answered, as he began to make the wreath which Lucy was to wear around her neck. We then waited whilst Lucy made her toilet for the night, and when she was in bed, she came and himself fixed the wreath of garlic around her neck. The last words he said to her were, "Take care you do not disturb it. Even if the room feel close, do not tonight open the window or the door."
"I promise," said Lucy. "And thank you both 1,000 times for your kindness to me." "Ah, what have I done to be blessed with such friends?"
As we left the house in my fly, which was waiting, Van Helsing said,
"Tonight I can sleep in peace, and sleep I want. 2 nights of travel, much reading in the day between, much anxiety on the day to follow, a night to sit up without a wink. Tomorrow in the morning early you call for me, and we come together to see our pretty miss so much more strong for my spell which I have worked. Ha ha ha!"
He seemed confident, that I, remembering my own confidence 2 nights before with the baneful result, felt vague terror. It must have been my weakness that made me hesitate to tell it to my friend, but I felt it all the more, like unshed tears. End chapter 10. Halfway through, buds. Yay! Hot damn, that Van Helsing voice is really like doing a number on my throat. So let's take a quick break. I'm gonna boop and grab some water. So go grab a water, stretch a little bit, de-shrimp, and then we will continue with chapter 11. Are you guys talking about the garlic thing? We've actually looked this up before. I'm trying to remember, but I believe I think a lot of people believe that the OG, like the original reason that the garlic thing became like vampire related is because there was a disease that was like a like an exsanguination sort of disease that was affected by garlic in some way, legitimately. Like they would use it as a medicine to help with with like blood related diseases. So yes, that was the other thing. Deacon said it. People who suffer from porphyria also have intolerance to foods that have a high sulfur content, like garlic. Yes, that's what it was. Watson, what the fuck? I was drinking water and she jumped up and smashed into my arm. The glass like shot up against my teeth. Holy shit, that hurt. Hi. What's your problem? I thought it was the sound of ice cubes. It was not. It was not. It was my cat being a goober, and now she's making biscuits on me. Whatever. Alright. We good? We good to continue? She says, shall we? Shall we, Mom? Oh yeah, this is a 8-hour track on Spotify called Calming Fireplace Burning Ambiance, Crackling Fire Sounds. It's great. It's perfect for this. I've used it for every Dracula. Alrighty. Let us continue. Does the cat not have a picture? It does. It's on my head. Alrighty. Chapter 11. We're halfway through. Lucy Westenra's diary, September 12th. They are all, like, so good to me. I just love that Dear Dr. Van Helsing. I wonder why he was so anxious about the flowers. Like, he soups frightened me. He was fierce, and yet he must have been right. Like, I feel so much comfort from them, and, like, somehow I don't dread being alone tonight. Like, it feels like I could kind of just, like, sleep without fear. So, you know, I just won't mind any flapping outside the window. Because I have had, like, such a terrible struggle. I have had against sleep so often of late. The pain of sleeplessness, the pain of a fear of sleep. Like, so much horror has it had for me. How blessed are some people whose lives have no fears, no dreads, whom sleep is a blessing? Ugh, imagine. Imagine it bringing nothing but sweet dreams. Well, here I am tonight, hoping for sleep. Fingies crossed. And lying like Ophelia in the play with virgin krantz and maiden struments. I never liked garlic before, but tonight, oh, love it. There's peace in the smell, and I feel sleep coming already. So, good night. Dr. Seward's diary, September 13th. Called at the Berkeley and found Van Helsing, as usual, up to time. The carriage ordered from the hotel was waiting. The professor took his bag, which he always brings with him now. Let all be put down exactly. Van Helsing and I arrived at Hillingham at 8 o'clock. It was a lovely morning, the bright sunshine and all the fresh feeling of early autumn. It seemed like the completion of nature's annual work. The leaves were turning to all kinds of beautiful colors, but had not yet begun to drop from the trees when we entered. We met Mrs. Westenra coming out of the morning room. She's an early riser, and she greeted us warmly. You will be glad to know Lucy is better. The dear child is still asleep. I looked into her room. I saw her, but I haven't gone in yet, lest I should disturb her. The professor smiled and looked quite jubilant. He rubbed his hands together and said, "Ha ha, I thought I had diagnosed the case. My treatment is working." To which she answered, "You must not take all the credit to yourself, doctor. Lucy's state this morning is due in part to me."
"How do you mean, ma'am?" asked the professor.
Well, I was anxious about the dear girl in the night, so I went into her room, and she was sleeping soundly, so soundly.
Oh no. I just remembered this. Okay, sorry. Anyways.
She was sleeping soundly, so soundly that even my coming did not wake her. But the room was awfully stuffy. There were a lot of these horrible, strong-smelling flowers everywhere. She even had some around her neck, and I just feared that the heavy odor would be too much for my dear child in her weak state, so I took them all away. I opened a bit of the window to let in a little fresh air, and you will be pleased with her, I am sure. She moved off into her boudoir where she usually breakfasted early, and as she spoke, I watched the professor's face. I saw him turn ashen gray. He hadn't been able to retain his self-command while the poor lady was present. He knew her state and how mischievous a shock would be. He actually smiled to her as he held open the door for her to pass into her room. But the instant she disappeared, he pulled me suddenly, forcibly, into the dining room and closed the door, and then, for the first time in my life, I saw Van Helsing break down. He raised his hands over his head in a sort of mute despair and beat his palms together in a helpless way. Finally, he sat on a chair and, putting his hands before his face, he began to sob, loud, dry sobs that seemed to come from the very racking of his heart. He raised his arms again as though appealing to the whole universe. "God, God, God," he said, "what have we done? What has this poor thing done that we are so sore beset? Is there fate amongst us still sent down from the pagan world of old, that such things must be in such a way? This poor mother, all unknowing, and all for the best as she does think, does such a thing as lose her daughter's body and soul, and we must not tell her, we must not even warn her, or she die, and then both die, and oh, how we are beset, how we are all the powers of the devils against us." Suddenly he jumped to his feet. "Come," he said, "come, we must see and act, devils or no devils, or all the devils at once, it matters not, we fight him all the same." He went into the hall door for his bag, and together we went to Lucy's room. Is that my child? One moment. I think we're okay. Once again, I drew up the blind whilst Van Helsing went toward the bed. This time he did not start, as he looked on the poor face with the same awful, waxen pallor as before. He wore a look of stern sadness and infinite pity. "As I expected," he murmured, with a hissing inspiration of which meant so much. Without a word, he went and locked the door, and then began to set out on the table the instruments for yet another operation of transfusion of blood. I had long ago recognized the necessity and begun to take off my coat. He stopped me with a warning hand. "No," he said. "Today you must operate, and I shall provide. You are weakened already." As he spoke, he took off his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeve. And again the operation, again the narcotic, again some return of color to the ashy cheeks, the regular breathing of healthy sleep. This time I watched, whilst Van Helsing recruited himself and rested. Presently he took an opportunity of telling Mrs. Westenra she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him, that the flowers were of medicinal value, that the breathing of their odor was part of the system of cure. He took over the care of the case himself, saying that he would watch this night and the next, and would send me word when to come. After another hour, Lucy waked from sleep, fresh and bright, and seemingly not much the worse for her terrible ordeal. But what does it all mean? I'm beginning to wonder if my long habit of life amongst the insane is beginning to tell upon my brain. Lucy Westenra's diary, September 17th. Wow, 4 days and nights of peace. I am getting so strong again, I hardly know myself. It's like if I had passed through some long nightmare and just awakened to see this beautiful sunshine and, feel fresh air of the morning around me.
I have a dim, like, half remembrance of long, anxious times of waiting and being fearful and, you know, like, darkness in which there was not even the pain of hope to make present distress more poignant. And then long spells of, like, oblivion and the rising back to life as a diver coming up through a great press of water. You know, just girly things. But since Dr. Van Helsing has been with me, all the bad dreams, they've just passed. Like the noises that used to frighten me out of my wits, the flapping against the windows, then distant voices, which seemed so close, the harsh sounds that came from, I don't know where. They would like command me to do stuff or whatever. Anyways, it's all ceased. And I go to bed now without any fear of sleep. I don't even try to keep awake. You know, I've grown quite fond of garlic. A boxful arrives for me every day from Harlem, and tonight Dr. Van Helsing is going away. He has to be for a day in Amsterdam, but I need not be watched. I'm well enough to be left alone. Thank God for Mother's sake, and dear Arthur's, and all our friends who have been so kind. Like, I shall not even feel the change. Last night, Dr. Van Helsing slept in his chair a lot of the time, and I found him asleep twice when I woke up. But, you know, I didn't fear going to sleep again, although the bows or bats or something were definitely like flapping super angry against the window panes. What's that all about? The Pall Mall Gazette, September 18th. The Escaped Wolf, the perilous adventure of our interviewer, an interview with the keeper in the Zoological Gardens. After many inquiries and almost as many refusals and perpetually using the words Pall Mall Gazette as a sort of talisman, I managed to find the keeper of the section of the Zoological Gardens in which the wolf department is included. Thomas Builder lives in one of the cottages in the enclosure behind the elephant house and was just sitting down to his tea when I found him. Thomas and his wife are hospitable folk, elderly without children, and if the specimen I enjoyed of their hospitality be of the average kind, their lives must be pretty comfortable. The keeper would not enter on what he called business until the supper was over, and we were all satisfied, and then when the table was cleared, he had lit his pipe. One moment while I drink some water. Sorry, Watson. Just elbowed Watson in the head. My bad, I'm sorry, baby. Yeah, she's totes fine. Don't even, like, worry about it, guys. Isn't this book really old? It is. It's quite old. Okay. A shout out to everybody who was there during the stream earlier when we were setting everything up for Dracula tonight. At one point I said, "Oh good, another character who has an accent written in," and we've reached them. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this as written, but with the strongest American accent I can do. All right, great, because it's the only way that I can do it and not die. Okay, here we go. Now, sir, you can go on and arsk me what you want. You'll excuse me refusin' to talk to professional subjects afore meals. I give the wolves and the jackals and the hyenas and all our section their tea afore I begin to arsk them questions. How do you mean ask them questions? I queried, wishful to get him into a talkative humor. Ittin' of them over the 'ead with a pole is one way, scratchin' of their hears is another, when gents is as flush wants a bit of a show-orf to their gals. I don't so much mind the fuss, the ittin' with a pole afore I chucks in their dinner, but I wait till they've 'ad their sherry and cawfee, so to speak, afore I tries on with the ear-scratchin', mind you, he added philosophically. There's a deal of the same nature in us as in them theer animyles. Here you a-comin' and arskin' of me questions about me business, and I that grumpy like that's only for your bloomin' arfquid. I'd a seen you blowed fussed 'fore I'd answer, not even when you arsked me sarcastic like. If I'd like you to arsk the superintendent, if you might arsk me questions. Without offense, did I tell yer to go to L? Yup, you did. And when you said you'd report me for using of obscene language that was hitting me over the head, but with the arfquid made that all right, I weren't a-going to fight, so I waited for the food and did with my owl as the wolves and lions and tigers does. But Lord love your art, now that the old ooman has stuck a chunk of her tea cake in me and rinsed me out with her bloomin' old teapot, and I've lit hup, you may scratch my ears for all you're worth and won't get even a growl out of me. Drive along with your questions. I know what you're a-comin' at. That ear escaped wolf. Exactly. I want you to give me your view of it. Tell me how it happened. When I know the facts, I'll get you to say what you consider was the cause and how you think the whole affair will end. All right, governor. This ear is about the old story. That ear wolf, what we call Berserker, was one of 3 gray ones that came from Norway to Jamrax, which we bought off him 4 years ago. He was a nice, well-behaved wolf that never gave no trouble to talk of. I'm more surprised at him for wanting to get out, nor any other animile in the place. But there you can't trust wolves, nor more nor women. What? Don't you mind him, sir, broke in Mrs. Tom with a cheery laugh. He's got mindin' the animile so long that blessed if he ain't like an old wolf hisself. But there ain't no harm in him. Well, sir, it was about 2 hours after feeding yesterday when I first hear my disturbance. I was making up a litter in the monkey house for a young puma which is ill, but when I heard the yelpin' and the owlin', I kem away straight. There was Berserker a-tearin' like a mad thing at the bars as if he wanted to get out. There wasn't much people about that day, and close at hand was only one man, a tall, thin chap with a hook nose and a pointed beard, with a few white hairs running through it. He had a hard, cold look and red eyes, and I took sort of a mislike to him. It seemed as if it was him as they was irritated at. He had white kid gloves on his hands, and he pointed at the animals to me, and says, Keeper, these wolves seem upset at something. Maybe it's you, says I, for I did not like the airs as he was giving hisself. He didn't get angry, as I hoped he would, but he smiled a kind of insolent smile with a mouthful of white sharp teeth. Oh no, they wouldn't like me, he says. Oh yes, they would, says I, imitatin' of him. They always like a bone or two to clean their teeth on about tea time, which you has a bag full. Can you imagine? I love that it says animals. Every time it says animals, it's very fun to say. Can you imagine going to a zoo and there's not even just a wolf. There's like an animal that's like losing it, right? And you're just minding your business. You're just some dude, right? Just pretend, hypothetically. You're just some dude. You're like watching this animal and you're like, man, zookeeper, that animal seems like pretty fucked up about something. And the guy turns to you and is like, yeah, maybe it's you. And you're trying to like laugh it off and you're like, no, I don't think it's me. No, he wouldn't want to eat me. I'm all skin and bones. And they're like, they like just lean into it like, I bet they'd love to eat you. I bet they'd love it. Like, what the fuck? Sir? Anyways. Well, it was an odd thing, but when the animals sees us a-talkin', they lay down. And when I went over to Berserker, he let me stroke his ears same as ever. That there man came over and blessed, but if he didn't put his hand and stroke the old wolf's ears too. Take care, says I. Berserker is quick. Never mind, he says. I'm used to them. Are you in the business yourself? I says, taking off my hat. For a man what trades in wolves, Ant's terror is a good friend to keepers. No, says he, not exactly in the business, but I have made pets of several. And with that he lifts his hat as perlite as a lord and walks away. Old Berserker kept a looking arter him till he was out of sight, and then went and lay down in a corner and wouldn't come out the whole evening. Well, last night, so soon as the moon was up, the wolves here all began a-owlin'. There weren't nothing for them to owl at. There weren't no one near, except someone that was evidently a-callin' dogs somewheres out back of the gardens in the park road. Once or twice I went out to see that all was right, and it was, and then the owlin' stopped just before 12 o'clock. I just took a look around there for turning and bust me, but when I came opposite the old berserker cage, I see the rails broken and twisted about, and the cage is empty. That's all I know for certain. Did anyone else see anything? FYI for people who are showing up now, this is all an excerpt from a newspaper, which is why I'm just on normal Duger for this. Did anyone else see anything? One of our gardeners was a coming home about that. Also, side note, can you imagine you're writing a newspaper and you're like, well, I guess I might as well write out exactly how this man speaks. I guess I might as well write out all the consonants he drops. And, you know, I'm just going to really, I think that this is going to be my big break. Holy shit. Anyways, okay, sorry. At least so, he says. I don't give myself much for it but if he did, he never said a word. Why he and then E? They're one right after it's fine. Never said a word about it to his missus when he got home. It was only after the escape of the wolf was made known, and we'd been up all night a-huntin' for the park of Berserker, that he remembered seeing anything. My own belief was that the harmony had gotten into his head. Mr. Builder, can you account in any way for the escape of the wolf? Well, sir, he said, with a suspicious sort of modesty, I think I can, but I don't know as how you'd be so satisfied with the theory. Certainly I shall, if a man like you, who knows the animals from experience, can't hazard a good guess at any rate, who is even to try? Well then, sir, I accounts for it this way. It seems to me the wolf escaped simply because he wanted to get out. From the hearty way that both Thomas and his wife laughed at the joke, I could see it had done service before, and that the whole explanation was simply an elaborate sell. I couldn't cope in badinage with the worthy Thomas, but I thought I knew a surer way to his heart. So I said, now, Mr. Builder, we'll consider that first half-sovereign worked off. This brother of his is waiting to be claimed when you've told me what you think will happen. Right yar, sir, he said briskly. Ye'll excuse me. I know for a chaffin' o' ye, but the old woman here winked at me, which is as much tellin' me to go on. Well, I never, said the old lady. My opinion is this. That 'ere wolf is a-hidin' of somewheres. The gardener, what didn't remember, said he was a gallopin' northward faster than a horse could go. I don't believe him, for you see, sir, wolves don't gallop no more than dogs does. They not bein' built that way. Wolves is fine things in a storybook. I to say when they gets in packs and does be chivian? That's more afeard than they is. They can make a devil of a noise and chop it up, whatever it is. But lor bless ye, in real life a wolf is only a low creature, not half so clever or bold as a good dog. Not half a quarter so much fightin' him. This one ain't been used to fightin' or even to providin' for himself. More like he's somewhere around the park, hidin' and a shiverin' of. And if he thinks at all, wonderin' where he is to get his breakfast from. Maybe he's got down some area and is in a cold cellar. My eye, won't some cook get a rum start when she sees his green eyes a-shinin' at her out of the dark. If he can't get food, he's bound to look for it. Mayhap he may chance to light on a butcher's shop in time. If he doesn't, and some nursemaid goes a-walkin' arf with a soldier a-leavin' of the hinfant of the perambulator, well then I shouldn't be surprised if the census is one baby the less, that's all. What the fuck? Who is this man? I was handing him the half-sovereign when something came bobbing up against the window, and Mr. Builder's face doubled its natural length with surprise. God bless me, he said, if there ain't old Berserker come back by himself. I'm so lost. It's fine. We'll go over all of this once it's done. He went to the door and opened it, a most unnecessary proceeding, it seems to me. Sherlock, what are you doing, buddy? If you want to be on my lap, just get on my lap, dude. It's fine. But I'm trying to like set a mood here. I'm really committing to these accents, Sherlock, and you're distracting me is all, buddy. A most unnecessary proceeding, it seemed to me. I've always thought that a wild animal never looks so well as when some obstacle of pronounced durability is between us. A personal experience has intensified rather than diminished this idea. After all, however, there is nothing like custom, for neither builder nor his wife thought any more of the wolf than I should of a dog. The animal itself was as peaceful and well-behaved as the father of all picture wolves, Red Riding Hood's quondam friend, whilst moving her confidence in masquerade. The whole scene was an unutterable mixture of comedy and pathos. The wicked wolf that for half a day had paralyzed London and set all the children in the town shivering in their shoes was there in sort of a penitent mood, and was received and petted like a vulpine prodigal son. Old Builder examined him all over with tender solicitude, and when he had finished with his penitent said, "There, I knew the poor old chap would get into some kind of trouble. Didn't I say it all along? Here's his head all cut and full of broken glass. He's been a-getting over some bloomin' wall or another. It's a shame people are allowed to top their walls with broken bottles. This here's what's comin' of it. Come along, Berserker." He took the wolf and locked him up in a cage, with a piece of meat that satisfied, in quantity at any rate, the elementary conditions of the fatted calf, and went off to report. I came off too to report the only exclusive information that is given today regarding the strange escapade at the zoo. So basically, this dude, whoever they were, whoever our like narrator of that newspaper clipping was, went to the zoo because a huge wolf had escaped, and it was like a whole thing. And there were all these rumors of like an escaped wolf from the zoo that was just running around London. And so this guy managed to get an interview with basically the like zookeepers that took care of the wolves. And so it's like an elderly couple that lives at the zoo. And the old man is like, yeah, I mean, last time I saw Berserker, was the name of the wolf. Last time I saw Berserker, there was this weirdo who was just sitting there looking at the wolves. I came over to feed the wolves and gave him a bunch of guff, but in the end, like, Berserker was super chill with this guy, so I chatted him up a little bit, and that was that. But then, next time that I came by to see Berserker, he had somehow escaped his pen. And then the guy who was interviewing him was like, okay, well, where do you think he could have gone? And the guy was like, well, he's going to be hungry. He's going to go somewhere where he can get food. So, like, you know, I would say, like, look at, you know, butcheries or something like that, because he's going to, you know, he's been fed his whole life. He's never had to, like, take care of himself. So he's going to fucking die out there. And the second he says that, Berserker shows up again, right? Just like super casually just walks back to the zoo, walks in. The zookeeper like gives him a big once over and is like, looks like he got cut up by some glass, but he seems fine. And I guess he's here. Cool. He came home. That's neat. So we, the reader, because we've seen similar things to what they're describing this wolf did, we, the reader, we know that this dog, this wolf, is responding to Dracula, right? That the person who the big old weirdo that came to the zoo and was staring at the wolves was probably Dracula, or somebody who is like a thrall of Dracula. That the wolf ran off in a frenzy to be near Dracula, most likely, exactly like Renfield does. Its head has like a bunch of broken glass on it. You could maybe make the leap from, at this point in the book, that maybe he tried to get into the exact same chapel that Renfield has tried to get into, and maybe the pieces of glass were part of the chapel. But just like Renfield has like these ebbs and flows of like, I don't know if mania is the right word, but like needing to be near Dracula and then suddenly being okay again. So the dog was not okay, ran away somehow, vanished, terrorized London for like a couple days, and then just like super chill came back. So, but you know, from the perspective of the newspaper, it's he got out, he probably tried to get some food, hurt himself, and then came home. And they're like, okay, I guess that's that. All right. Back to the character study. Back to the character work. Back to flexing our acting muscles, dude. Let's go. Dr. Seward's diary, September 17th. I was engaged after dinner in my study posting up my books, which, through press of other work and the many visits to Lucy, had fallen sadly into arrear. Suddenly the door was burst open, and in rushed my patient with his face distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck, for such a thing as a patient getting of his own accord into the superintendent's study is almost unknown. Without an instant's pause, he made straight for me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and as I saw he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. He was too quick and too strong for me, however. Before I could get my balance, he had struck at me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike again, however, I got in my right, and he was sprawling on his back on the floor. My wrist bled freely, and quite a pool trickled onto the carpet. I saw that my friend was not intent on further effort, and occupied myself binding up my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure all the time. When the attendants rushed in and we turned our attention to him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up, like a dog, the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and, to my surprise, went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is the life! The blood is the life, my dudes!" I could not afford to lose blood just at present. I've lost too much of late for my physical good. And then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness, its horrible phases, it's telling on me. I'm overexcited, I'm weary, I need rest, rest, rest. And happily Van Helsing has not summoned me, so I need not forego my sleep. Tonight, I could not well do without it. Ow! Sherlock, what the fuck? Bruh, these cats. I love them both so much. Okay. Telegram from Van Helsing to Dr. Seward. September 17th. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time frequently, visit and see that flowers are as placed. Very important. Do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible after arrival. Dr. Seward's diary, September 18th. Just off for a train to London, the arrival of Van Helsing's telegram filled me with dismay. A whole night lost, and I know by bitter experience what may happen in a night. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there's some horrible doom hanging over us that every possible accident should thwart us in all we try to do. I shall take the cylinder with me, and then I can complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. Memorandum left by Lucy Westenra, September 17th, nighttime.
I write this, and I leave it to be seen so that no one may by any chance get into trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight, and I feel I am dying of weakness and have barely the strength to write, but it has to be done. If I die in the doing,
Is that my child? One moment. I don't want to interrupt Lucy's big shebang. One sec. Okay. I think we're all right.
anywho, I went to bed as usual. I took care that the flowers were placed like Dr. Van Helsing directed, and then I fell asleep. I woke up because there was flapping at the window, which had begun after that sleepwalking stuff on the cliff at Whitby when Mina saved me. And now, I hear it all the time. I know it so well. I wasn't afraid, but I did wish that Dr. Seward was in the next room. Because Dr. Van Helsing said he would be, so that I might have called him. And I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't. And then there came to me the old fear of sleep. And I was so determined to stay awake. Perversely, sleep would try to come. And then, I didn't want it. I was so scared to be alone. I opened my door. I called out, "Is anybody there?" And there was no answer. And I was so afraid to wake my mother. I just closed my door again. And then outside in the shrubbery, I heard a sort of howl, like a dog, but fiercer and deeper. And so I went to the window and I looked out, but I couldn't see anything. But there was this big bat, which evidently had been just hitting the window with its wings or whatever. So I went back to bed, still didn't want to go to sleep. And then the door opened and my mom looked in, seeing by my moving that I was not asleep. She came in and she sat with me and she said to me even more sweetly and softly than her wont, "I was uneasy about you, darling. I came in to see if you were all right." Oh, I just feared that she might catch cold sitting there, so I asked her to come in and sleep with me. So she came into the bed. She laid down next to me. She didn't take off her dressing gown. She said she would only stay for a little minute and then go back to her own bed. So as she's laying there in my arms and I in hers, the flapping happens again and the buffeting against the window. And she was super startled and frightened and was like, "What is that?" And then I tried to pacify her and finally it worked and she was chill, but I could hear her poor heart. It was beating so terribly. So after a while there was this howl again, out in the shrubbery. Shortly after there was a crash at the window, a bunch of broken glass all over the floor. The window blind blew back with the wind and it rushed in, and the aperture of the broken panes, there was the head of this huge wolf. Oh my God. My mother cried out in fright, struggled up into a sitting position, clutched wildly at literally anything. Amongst other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Van Helsing insisted on my wearing around my neck and tore it off of me. And for a second or two, she sat up, pointed at the wolf. There was this horrible gurgling in her throat. And then she fell over, struck with lightning, and her head hit my forehead and it made me dizzy. And then the room began to spin and I kept my eyes fixed on the window, but the wolf, it drew its head back and a whole myriad of little specks seemed to come blowing in through the broken window and wheeling and circling around like the pillars of dust that travelers describe when there's a simoon in the desert. And I tried to move, but there was it was like there was a spell upon me. And dear mother's poor body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat. It weighed me down, and I don't remember anything for a while. The time didn't seem long, but it seemed very awful until I recovered consciousness again, and somewhere near a passing bell was tolling, and the dogs everywhere all over the neighborhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing, and I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my mother, my dead mother, come back to comfort me. And the sound seemed to have awakened the maids, too. I could hear their bare feet pattering outside of my door, and I called to them, and they came in, and when they saw what had happened, what was it that laid over me on the bed, they screamed, and the wind rushed in through the broken window, and the door slammed, and they lifted off the body of my dear mother and laid her covered with a sheet on the bed after I got up. They were so frightened and so nervous. I directed them to go to the dining room and have each a glass of wine. And the door flew open for an instant and then closed again. And the maids, they shrieked and then went in a body to the dining room. And I laid what flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. And when they were there, I remembered what Dr. Van Helsing told me. But I didn't like to remove them. And besides, I would have some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids didn't come back. I called them, but there was no answer, so I went to the dining room to look for them, and my heart sank when I saw what happened. all of them, all four, helpless on the floor, breathing heavily, the decanter of sherry on the table half full. And there was this strange, like queer, acrid smell about it. And I was so suspicious. I examined the decanter and it smelled like laudanum. Looking on the sideboard, I found that the bottle, which Mother's doctor uses for her, did use, oh God, was empty. And what am I to do? What am I to do? I am back in the room with my mother. I can't leave her. I'm alone, save for sleeping servants that someone drugged. Alone with the dead, and I can't go out. I can hear the low howl of this wolf through the broken window, and the air is just full of specks floating and circling in the draft from the window, and the lights burn blue and dim, and what am I to do? God shield me from this harm this night. I'll hide this paper in my breast where they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother is gone. And I suppose it's time that I go too. Goodbye, my dear Arthur. If I should not survive this night, God keep you, dear, and God help me.
End chapter 11. That's why I wanted to make sure that Clark was asleep. I didn't want to stop in the middle of that. Yeah, dude. I gave her a goofy voice, but like, her story is actually so heartbreaking. What part of California is Lucy from? Lucy, like, I thought it would be fun to characterize her this way just because, well, first of all, everybody absolutely adores her. She's meant to be like very cute and sweet, but like when we the first times that we interact with Lucy and she gets an opportunity to like have chapters and sections to herself, it's all very like, life's great. I'm so excited. I have all these boys who love me, and, you know, like, stuff's going good, and my bestie and I are, like, at the seaside, and, you know, we're gonna have a great summer. Yeah, she's like a textbook ingenue. She is. Yeah, she's very sweet. She's never done anything wrong. And then just a bunch of terrible shit happens to her. And it's very sad. Yeah, I saw somebody in chat was like, said something like, did Dodger give her this voice because she doesn't like the character? I love doing that voice. I would not give that voice to a character that I didn't like. I love Lucy. She's a really interesting character. She has 3 different PNG emotion things for a reason. Lucy deserved better. Of course she did. And it sucks because fucking Van Helsing knew, you know? There's a fox screaming outside. That's ominous. Let's take another quick break. I'm gonna double check that the chicken coop is closed. And that all of my alcohol hasn't been swapped with laudanum. Be right back.
All right, well, all of my alcohol has been swapped with laudanum, but it's fine. The chickens were fine. They're safe. What would laudanum taste like? I think the closest thing that we can equate laudanum to is like absinthe, right? It's something that people would partake of on purpose because it had like a really strong hallucinatory and like drug effect. But yeah. I have a cousin who has the nickname of Lucy, and she lives in California. No, she doesn't speak like that. Good to know. I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, and I met plenty of people who grew up there that did and didn't speak like that. All right. Final chapter. Let's go. Oh. Dr. Seward's diary, September 18th. This chapter is going to be really depressing. Okay, let's go. I drove at once to Hillingham and arrived early, keeping my cab at the gate. I went up the avenue alone. I knocked gently and rang as quietly as possible, for I feared to disturb Lucy or her mother, and hoped to only bring a servant to the door. After a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang again, but still no answer. I cursed the laziness of the servants, that they should lie abed at such an hour, for it was now 10 o'clock, and so rang and knocked again, more impatiently, and still without response. Hitherto I had blamed only the servants, but now a terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom which seemed drawing tight around us? Was it, indeed, a house of death, to which I had come too late? I knew that minutes, even seconds of delay might mean hours of danger for Lucy, if she had again one of those frightful relapses, and I went around the house to try to see if I could find by any chance an entry anywhere. I could find no means of ingress, every window and door fastened and locked, and I returned baffled to the porch. As I did so, I heard the rapid pit-pat of a swiftly driven horse's feet. They stopped at the gate, and a few seconds later I met Van Helsing, running up to the avenue, and when he saw me, he gasped out that it was you, and just arrived. How is she? Are we too late? Did you not get my telegram? I answered as quickly and coherently as I could that I had only got his telegram early this morning, and had not lost a minute in coming here, that I could not make any one in the house hear me. He paused and raised his hat as he said solemnly, I fear we are too late. God's will be done. With his usual recuperative energy, he went on, Come! If there be no way to get in, we must make one. Time is all in all to us now. We went around to the back of the house, where there was a kitchen window. The professor took a small surgical saw from his case, and handing it to me, pointed to the iron bar which guarded the window. I attacked them at once, and had very soon cut through 3 of them, and then, with a long, thin knife, we pushed back the fastening of the sashes and opened the window. I helped the professor in and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen, or in the servants' rooms, which were close at hand. We tried all the rooms as we went along, and in the dining room, dimly lit by the rays of light through the shutters, found 4 servant women lying on the floor. There was no need to think of them dead. Their stertorous breathing and the acrid smell of laudanum in the room left no doubt as to their condition. Van Helsing and I looked at each other, and as we moved away, he said, We can attend to them later. We ascended to Lucy's room. For an instant or two we paused at the door to listen, but there was no sound that we could hear. With white faces and trembling hands we opened the door gently and entered the room. How shall I describe what I saw? On the bed lay 2 women, Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, covered with a white sheet, the edge of which had been blown back by the drought through the broken window, showing the drawn white face with a look of terror fixed upon it. And by her side lay Lucy, with face white and still more drawn, the flowers which had been around her neck found on her mother's bosom, her throat bare, showing 2 little wounds, which we had noticed before, looking horribly white and mangled. Without a word, the professor bent over the bed, his head almost touching poor Lucy's breast. He gave a quick turn of his head, as of one who listens, and leaping to his feet, he cried to me, "It is not yet too late! Quick! Bring the brandy!" I flew downstairs. I returned with it, taking care to smell and taste it, lest it, too, drugged like the decanter of sherry which I found on the table. The maids were still breathing, but more restlessly, and I fancied that the narcotic must be wearing off. I did not stay to make sure, but returned to Van Helsing. He rubbed the brandy, as on another occasion, on her lips and gums, on her wrist, and the palms of her hands. He said to me, "I can do this. All that can be at the present. You go wake those maids. Flick them in the face with a wet towel. Flick them hard. Make them get heat and fire and a warm bath. This poor soul is nearly as cold as that beside her. She will need be heated before we can do anything more." I went at once. I found little difficulty waking 3 of the women. The 4th was only a young girl, and the drug had evidently affected her more strongly. I lifted her to the sofa and let her sleep. The others were dazed at first, but as remembrance came back to them, they cried, they sobbed in a hysterical manner. I was stern with them, however, and would not let them talk. I told them one life was bad enough to lose. If they delayed, they would sacrifice Miss Lucy, and so, sobbing and crying, they went about their way, half clad as they were, preparing fire and water. Fortunately, the kitchen and boiler fires were still alive, and there was no lack of hot water. We had a bath, and carried Lucy out as she was, and placed her in it. And whilst we were busy chafing her limbs, there was a knock at the hall door. One of the maids ran off, hurried on some more clothes, and opened it, and then she returned and whispered to us that there was a gentleman who had come with a message from Mr. Homewood. I bade her simply tell him that he must wait. We could see no one now. She went away with the message, engrossed with our work, and I forgot all about him. I never saw in all my experience the professor work in such deadly earnest. I knew, as he knew, that it was a stand-up fight with death, and in pause I told him so. He answered me in a way that I didn't understand, with the sternest look that his face could wear. "If that were all, I would stop here where we are now, and let her fade in peace, for I see no light in life over her horizon." He went on with his work, with, if possible, renewed, more frenzied vigor. Presently we both... Sherlock. Chill out. Chill out, cats, come on. Presently we both began to be conscious that the heat was begging to be of some effect. Lucy's heart beat a trifle more audibly to the stethoscope, and her lungs had a perceptible movement. Van Helsing's face almost beamed, and as we lifted her from the bath and rolled her in a hot sheet to dry her, he said to me, "The first gain is ours. Check to the king." We took Lucy into another room, which had by now been prepared, and laid her in bed and forced a few drops of brandy down her throat. I noticed that Van Helsing tied a soft silk handkerchief around her throat. She was still unconscious, and was quite as bad, if not worse, than we had ever seen her. Van Helsing called in one of the women, and told her to stay with her, and not to take her eyes off of her until we returned, and then beckoned me out of the room. "We must consult as to what is to be done," he said, as we descended the stairs. In the hall he opened the dining-room door, and we passed in, and he closed the door carefully behind him. The shutters had been opened, but the blinds were already drawn, with the obedience to the etiquette of death which the British women of the lower classes always rigidly observe. The room was therefore dimly dark. It was, however, light enough for our purposes. Van Helsing's sternness was somewhat relieved by a look of perplexity. He was evidently torturing his mind about something, so I waited for an instant, and then he spoke. "And what are we to do now? What are we to turn to for help? We must have another transfusion of blood, and that soon, or the poor girl's life won't be worth an hour's of purchase. You're exhausted, I am exhausted too. I fear to trust these women, even if they would have courage to submit. What are we to do for someone who will open his veins for her?"
What's the matter with me anyhow?
The voice came from the sofa across the room, and its tones brought relief and joy to my heart. They were those of Quincy Morris! Van Helsing started angrily at the first sound, but his face softened and a glad look came to his eyes as I cried out, "Quincy Morris!" and rushed toward him with outstretched hands. "And what has brought you here?" I cried as our hands met.
"I guess art is the cause."
He handed me a telegram. And it said, "Have not heard from Seward in 3 days. I'm terribly anxious. I cannot leave. Father is still in some condition. Send me word how Lucy is. Do not delay. From Arthur Homewood."
"I think I came just in the nick of time. You know you only have to tell me what to do."
Van Helsing strode forward and took his hand, looking him straight in the eyes as he said,
"A brave man's blood is the best thing on this earth when a woman is in trouble. You are a man and no mistake. The devil may work against us for all he is worth, but God sends us men when we want them."
Once again, we went through the ghastly operation, and I have not the heart to go through the details. Lucy got a terrible shock, and it told on her more than before, for though plenty of blood went into her veins, her body did not respond to the treatment as well as on other occasions. Her struggle back to life was something frightful to see and to hear. However, the action of both heart and lungs improved, and Van Helsing made a subcutaneous injection of morphia as before with good effect. Her faint became a profound slumber. The professor watched whilst I went downstairs with Quincy Morris, who sent one of the maids to pay off one of the cabmen who were waiting. I left Quincy lying down after having a glass of wine and told the cook to get ready a good breakfast. And then a thought struck me, and I went back to the room where Lucy now was. When I came softly in, I found Van Helsing with a sheet or two of notepaper in his hands. He had evidently read it, and was thinking it over as he sat with his hand to his brow. There was a look of grim satisfaction on his face, as of one who has had a doubt solved. He handed me the paper, saying,
"It dropped from Lucy's breast when we carried her to the bath."
When I read it, I stood looking at the professor, and after a pause I asked him, "What in God's name, what does it all mean? Was she or is she mad? What sort of horrible danger is it?" I was so bewildered, I did not know what to say more. Van Helsing put out his hand and took the paper.
"Do not trouble about it now. Forget it for the present. You shall know and understand it all in good time, but it will be later. And now, what is it that you came to me to say?"
This brought me back to my fact, and I was myself again. "I came to speak about the certificate of death. If we do not act properly and wisely, there may be an inquest, and that paper would have to be produced. I'm in hopes that we need have no inquest, for if we had it, it would surely kill Lucy if nothing else did. I know, and you know, and the other doctor who attended her knows that Mrs. Westenra had a disease of the heart, and we can certify she died of it. Let's fill up the certificate at once, and I shall take it in myself to the register and go to the undertaker."
"Oh, good! Oh, my friend John, well thought of. Truly, Miss Lucy, if she be sad in the foes that beset her, is at least happy in the friends that love her. 1, 2, 3, I'll open their veins for her, besides one old man. Yes, I know. Friend John, I am not blind. I love you all the more for it. Now go!"
In the hall, I met Quincy with a telegram for Arthur telling him that Mrs. Westenra was dead, that Lucy had also been ill but was now going on better, and that Van Helsing and I were with her. I told him where I was going, and he hurried me out, but as I was going said, "When you come back, Jack, I may have 2 words with you all yourselves." Let's try that again.
"When you come back, Jack, may I have 2 words with you all to ourselves?"
I nodded in reply and went out. I found no difficulty about the registration and arranged with the local undertaker to come up in the evening to measure for the coffin and to make arrangements. When I got back, Quincy was waiting for me, and I told him I would see him as soon as I knew about Lucy and went to her room. She was still sleeping, and the professor seemingly had not moved from his seat at her side. From his putting his finger to her lips, I gathered that he expected her to wake before long and was afraid of forestalling nature. I went down to Quincy and took him into the breakfast room, where the blinds were not drawn down, and which was a little more cheerful, or rather less cheerless, than the other rooms. When we were alone, he said to me, "Jack Seward, I don't want to shove myself in anywhere where I've no right to be, but this is no ordinary case. You know I love that girl. I wanted to marry her, but although that's all past and gone, I can't help feeling anxious about her all the same." What is it that's wrong with her? The Dutchman, fine old fellow he is, I can see that. He said that time you two came into the room you must have had another transfusion of blood, that both you and he were exhausted. I know well you medical men speak in camera, that a man must not expect to know what they consult about in private, but this is no common matter. Whatever it is, I've done my part, is that not so? That is so, I said. And he went on, I take it both you and Van Helsing has done already what I did today. Is that not so? That's so. And I guess Art was in on it too. When I saw him 4 days ago at his own place, he looked queer. Haven't seen anything pulled down so quick since I was on the pampas and had a mare that I was fond of go grass all in the night. One of them big bats that they call vampires got her in the night, and what with his gorge and a vein left open, there weren't enough blood in her to let her stand up. I had to put a bullet in her as she lay. Jack, if you may tell me without betraying confidence, Arthur was the first. Is that not so? As he spoke, the poor fellow looked anxious. He was in a torture of suspense regarding the woman he loved, and his utter ignorance of the terrible mystery which seemed to surround her intensified his pain. Oh my God. His very heart was bleeding. It took all the manhood of him. And there was a royal lot of it, too, to keep him from breaking down. I paused before answering, for I felt that I must not betray anything which the professor wished to keep secret. But already he knew so much, and had guessed so much. There could be no reason for not answering. So I answered in the same phrase. That is so. And how long's this been going on? About 10 days. 10 days! Then I guess Jack Seward, that poor pretty creature that we all love, has had put into her veins within that time the blood of 4 strong men. Man alive, her whole body wouldn't hold it. Then, coming close to me, he spoke in a half whisper. And what took it out? I shook my head. That, I said, is the crux. Van Helsing is frantic about it. I'm at my wit's end. I can't even hazard a guess. There's been a series of little circumstances which have thrown out all our calculations as to Lucy being properly watched, but these shall not occur again. Here we stay until all is well or ill. Quincy held out his hand. Count me in, he said. You and the Dutchman will tell me what to do, and I'll do it. When she woke late in the afternoon, Lucy's first movement was to feel in her breast and, to my surprise, produce the paper which Van Helsing had given me to read. Oh my God, I need water. 1 sec. Everybody drink some water. All right. The careful professor had replaced it where it had come, lest on waking she should be alarmed. Her eye then lit on Van Helsing and on me too, and gladdened. Holy shit! Okay, I need a second. I need a second. How many pages do we have left? A lot. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna take a short break. Hold on. There's a point you get to where, like, every time you take a breath, it, like, itches a little bit. So I'm just gonna take a second. I burp. It's been some eventful chapters. It has. It has. There's been a lot. And there's a decent amount left of this chapter, so... We could do the rest of the chapter as ASMR. No, I'll get it done properly. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad that you guys enjoy when we do this. It's fun. Very chill, spooky times. Yeah, like I was saying, once we've finished the book, I would love to edit all of the parts together and just like upload one big video that's just Dodger reads all of Dracula. Am I the only one who's been wondering what book we could read after Dracula is over? No, we actually talked about that last time. So last time we were talking about how, because I think that this sort of thing is really fun, I talked about potentially doing a readathon, because I've been trying to come up with like fun charity ideas for like charity streams. So we were looking up books that are like really achievable numbers of hours in reading. Something that we could like technically do in one sitting, which is around 200 pages. So things like Frankenstein would totally work. I believe Picture of Dorian Gray was around that long. Jekyll and Hyde is actually super short. So we were looking up other like royalty-free books, basically like books where we could just read them and it's no big. And I was thinking it might be really fun to try and like do one of those books in one sitting for a charity stream. I don't know anything about Camilla. Yeah, Jekyll and Hyde is super short. We looked it up. We were looking up like what books could we read on stream that are like copyright free, basically, or like open domain. I don't know what the term is. Hi, Summer. Yeah, Frankenstein's on there. Jekyll and Hyde's on there. Dorian Gray, all kinds of books. Public domain, yeah. So, yeah, we were looking for ones that claim to be readable in the span of like a normal stream's amount of time, which would mean that it would take about double the amount of time for me to read it out loud, because I would have to take a bunch of breaks, and also just reading out loud is always gonna be longer than reading in your head, right? So bro, as much as I love plays and have so many of them, I would never read a play on stream. Part of the like, what's nice about reading a novel is there's a balance between dialogue and narration, you know? The narration sections are kind of a break from dialogue and vice versa. The switch up is really nice. And in a play, it's like direction and then dialogue. And the breakup of it is, it's not as easy to read it out loud, I don't think. Plays are fun, but reading them hurts. Yeah, I had to read so many of them in college, some of them out loud, and yeah, trying to like have a good flow to to reading a play out loud is a bit difficult. Yeah, that's true. Plays are fine if you've got buds. If everybody's like got a character assigned, you know? That's great. when is the next Dracula stream? So these are community reward things. So right when we finish this, we will make a new community reward that people basically put channel points into. And once it's fulfilled, then we try and like plan out when the next Dracula stream happens. It normally takes less than a week for it to be fulfilled, though. We really like the readings. I'm glad. I feel like I need to make it, because I feel like the number of people who are interested in them does not match the number of people who are able to show up for them. Not that I feel like these are very VOD friendly, right? I don't feel like people have to be here live for them. But I think I could do a better job of like letting people know when they're going to happen. I'm glad you guys like them. Okay, where were we? Talking is much easier now. Let's see. Okay, right. We're telling Quincy's asking a bunch of questions. Quincy's actually a smart Texan man. And he's like, I figured a bunch of shit out. Dr. Seward's like, fuck. Shit, fuck. That's where we were. So, the last thing that happened was Quincy said, man alive, her whole body wouldn't hold all the blood of 4 strong men. So what is taking it out? Right? I shook my head. That is the crux. Van Helsing is frantic about it. I'm at my wit's end. I can't even hazard a guess. There's been a series of little circumstances which have thrown out all of our calculations as to Lucy being properly watched, but those shall not occur again. Here we stay until all be well or ill. Count me in. You and the Dutchman tell me what to do and I'll do it. When she woke late in the afternoon, Lucy's first movement was to feel in her breast and to my surprise produced the paper which Van Helsing had given me to read. The careful professor had replaced where it had come from, lest on waking she should be alarmed. Her eye then lit on Van Helsing and on me too, and gladdened. And then she looked around the room and seeing where she was, shuddered and gave a loud cry and put her poor thin hands before her pale face. We understood what that meant, that she realized to the full her mother's death, and so we tried what we could to comfort her. Doubtless sympathy eased her somewhat, but she was very low in thought and spirit and wept silently and weakly for a very long time. We told her either or both of us would now remain with her at all times. It seemed to comfort her. Toward dusk she fell into a doze, and a very odd thing occurred. While still asleep, she took the paper from her breast and tore it in two. Van Helsing stepped over and took the pieces from her. All the same, however, she went on with the action of tearing, as though the material were still in her hands, and finally she lifted her hands and opened them, as though scattering the fragments. Van Helsing seemed surprised. His brows gathered as if in thought, but he said nothing. September 19th. All last night she slept fitfully, being always afraid to sleep and something weaker when she woke from it. The professor and I took it in turns to watch, and we never left her for a moment unattended. Quincy Morris said nothing about his intentions, but I knew that all night long he patrolled around and around the house. When the day came, its searching light showed the ravages in poor Lucy's strength. She was hardly able to turn her head. The little nourishment which she could take seemed to do her no good. At times she slept. Both Van Helsing and I noticed the difference in her between sleeping and waking. Whilst asleep, she looked stronger, although more haggard. Her breathing was softer. Her open mouth showed the pale gums drawn back from the teeth, which thus looked positively longer and sharper than usual. When she woke, the softness of her eyes evidently changed the expression. She looked her own self, although a dying one. In the afternoon she asked for Arthur, and we telegraphed for him. Quincy went off to meet him at the station. When he arrived, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and the sun was setting full and warm, and the red light streamed in through the window and gave more color to the pale cheeks. When he saw her, Arthur was simply choked with emotion, and none of us could speak. In the hours that had passed, the fits of sleep, or the comatose condition that passed for it, had grown more frequent, so that the pauses when conversation was possible were shortened. Arthur's presence, however, seemed to act as a stimulant. She rallied a little, and spoke to him more brightly than she had done since we arrived. He, too, pulled himself together and spoke as cheerily as he could, so that the best was made of everything. It was now nearly 1 o'clock, and he and Van Helsing are sitting with her. I'm to relieve them in a quarter of an hour, and I am entering this on Lucy's phonograph. Until 6 o'clock, they are to try to rest. I fear that tomorrow will end our watching, for the shock has been too great. The poor child cannot rally. God help us all. A letter from Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra on September 17th. So that's 2 days earlier than that last the last section by Dr. Seward.
My dearest Lucy, it seems an age since I heard from you, or indeed since I wrote. You will pardon me. I know for all my faults when you have read all my budget of news. I got my husband back all right. When we arrived at Exeter, there was a carriage waiting for us, and in it, though he had an attack of gout, was Mr. Hawkins. He took us to his house, where there were rooms for us all, nice and comfortable, and we dined together. And after dinner, Mr. Hawkins said, "My dears, I want to drink your health and prosperity, and may every blessing attend you both. I know you both from children, and have with love and pride seen you grown up. Now, I want you to make your home here with me. I have left to me neither chick nor child. All are gone, and in my will I have left you everything." I cried. Lucy, dear, as Jonathan and the old man clasped hands, our evening was such a very, very happy one. So, here we are, installed in this beautiful old house, and from both my bedroom and the drawing room I can see the great elms of the cathedral close, with their great black stems standing out against the old yellow stone of the cathedral, and I can hear the rooks overhead cawing and chattering and gossiping, and after the manner of rooks and humans, I am busy. I need not tell you arranging things, housekeeping. Jonathan and Mr. Hawkins are busy all day, because Jonathan is now a partner. Mr. Hawkins wants to tell him all about the clients. How is your dear mother getting on? I wish I could run up to town for a day or two to see you, dear. I dare not go yet with so much on my shoulders, and Jonathan wants... I skipped a page. Jonathan wants... Looking after still. He's beginning to put some flesh on his bones again, but he was terribly weakened by that long illness. Even now he sometimes starts out of his sleep in a sudden way and awakes trembling until I can coax him back to his usual placidity. However, thank God, these occasions grow less frequent as the days go on. They will in time pass away altogether, I trust. And now I've told you my news. So let me ask yours. When are you to be married? Where? Who is to perform the ceremony? And what are you to wear? Is it public or a private wedding? Tell me all about it, dear. Tell me all about everything. There's nothing which interests you which will not be dear to me. Jonathan asks me to send his respectful duty, but I don't think that's good enough from the junior partner of the important firm, Hawkins and Harker. So as you love me and he loves me and I love you with all the moods and tenses of the verb, I send you simply his love instead. So goodbye, my dearest Lucy. All the blessings to you. Yours, Mina Harker. A report from Patrick Hennessy to John Seward. My dear sir, in accordance with your wishes, I enclose a report of the conditions of everything left in my charge. With regard to patient Renfield, there is more to say.
He had had another outbreak, which might have had a dreadful ending, but which, as it fortunately happened, was unattended with any unhappy results. This afternoon, a carrier's cart with 2 men made a call at the empty house, whose grounds abut on ours, the house to which you will remember the patient twice ran away. The men stopped at our gate to ask the porter their way as they were strangers. I was myself looking out of the study window, having a smoke after dinner, and saw one of them come up to the house. As he passed the window of Renfield's room, the patient began to rate him from within, calling him all the foul names he could lay his tongue to. The man, who seemed a decent fellow enough, contented himself by telling him to shut up for a foul-mouthed beggar, whereon our man accused him of robbing him, wanting to murder him, said that he would hinder him if he were to swing for it. I opened the window and signed to the man not to notice, so he contented himself after looking the place over and making up his mind as to what kind of place he had got to by saying, "Lor bless you, sir, I wouldn't mind what was said to me in a bloomin' madhouse. I pity ye and the governor for having to live in a house with a wild beast like that." Then he asked his way civilly enough, and I was told him where the gate of the empty house was. He went away, followed by threats and curses and revilings from our man. I went down to see if I could make out any cause for anger, since he is usually such a well-behaved man, and except his violent fits, nothing of the kind had ever occurred. I found him, to my astonishment, composed and most genial in his manner. I tried to get him to talk of the incident, but he blandly asked me questions as to what I meant, and led me to believe he was completely oblivious of the affair. It was, I'm sorry to say, however, only another instance of his cunning, for within half an hour I heard of him again. This time, he broke out through the window of his room, and was running down the avenue. I called to the attendants to follow me, and ran after him. I feared he was intent on some mischief. My fear was justified when I saw the same cart which had passed before coming down the road, having on it some great wooden boxes. The men were wiping their foreheads and were flushed in the face as if with violent exercise. Before I could get up to him, the patient rushed at them and pulled one of them off the cart and began to knock his head against the ground. Fucking Renfield, dude. Renfield, baby, what is you doing? If I had not seized him just at that moment, I believe he would have killed the man. The other fellow jumped down and struck him over the head with the butt end of a heavy whip, and it was a terrible blow, but he did not seem to mind it, but seized him also and struggled with the 3 of us, pulling us to and fro as if we were kittens. You know I am no lightweight. The others were burly men. At first he was silent in his fighting, but as we began to master him and the attendants were putting a straight waistcoat on him, he began to shout, I'll frustrate them. They shan't rob me. They won't murder me. I'll fight for my master." All sorts of similarly incoherent ravings. It was with very considerable difficulty that they got him back to the house and put him in the padded room. One of the attendants, Hardy, had a finger broken. However, I set it all right, and he is going on well. The 2 carriers were at first very loud, and their threats of actions for damages and promised to rain all the penalties of the law upon us. Their threats were, however, mingled with some sort of indirect apology for the defeat of the 2 of them by a feeble madman. They said that if it had not been for the way that their strength had been spent in carrying and raising the heavy boxes to the cart, they would have made short work of him. They gave as another reason for their defeat the extraordinary state of drought to which they had been reduced by the dusty nature of their occupation, and the reprehensible distance from the scene of their labors of any place of public entertainment. I understood their drift, and after a stiff glass of grog, or rather more of the same, and with each a sovereign in hand, they made light of the attack, and swore that they would encounter a worse madman any day for the pleasure of meeting so bloomin' good a bloke as your correspondent. I took their names and addresses in case they might be needed. They are as follows: Jack Smollett of Dudding's Rents, King George's Road, Great Walworth, and Thomas Snelling, Peter Farley's Road, Guide Court, Bethnal Green. They are both in the employment of Harrison Sons, Moving and Shipment Company, Orange Masters Yard, Soho. I shall report to you any matter of interest occurring here, and shall wire you at once if there is anything of importance. Believe me, dear sir, yours faithfully, Patrick Hennessy. A letter from Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra. Unopened.
My dearest Lucy, such a sad blow has befallen us. Mr. Hawkins has died very suddenly. Some may not think it so sad for us, but we had both come to so love him, it really seems as though we've lost a father. I never knew either father or mother, so this dear old man's death, it's a real blow to me. Jonathan is greatly distressed. It is not only that he feels sorrow, deep sorrow, for this dear good man who befriended him all his life, and now at the end has treated him like his own son, left him a fortune, which to people of our modest bringing up is wealth beyond the dream of avarice, but Jonathan feels it on another account. He says the amount of responsibility which it puts upon him makes him nervous. He begins to doubt himself, and I try to cheer him up. My belief in him helps him to have a belief in himself, but it is here that the grave shock that he experienced tells upon him the most. It's too hard that a sweet, simple, noble, strong nature such as his, a nature which enabled him by our dear good friend's aid to rise from clerk to master in just a few years, should be so injured that the very essence of its strength is just gone. Forgive me, dear, if I worry you with my troubles in the midst of your own happiness, but Lucy, dear, I must tell someone. The strain of keeping up a brave and cheerful appearance for Jonathan, it tries me, and I have no one here, no one I can confide in. I dread coming to London, as we must do the day after tomorrow, for poor Mr. Hawkins left in his will that he was to be buried in the grave with his father. As there are no relations at all, Jonathan will have to be chief mourner, and I shall try to run over to see you, dearest, if only for a few minutes. So forgive me for troubling you. With all blessings, your loving Mina Harker.
Dr. Seward's Diary, September 20th. Only resolution and habit can let me make an entry tonight. I'm too miserable, too low-spirited, too sick of the world and everything in it, including life itself. I would not care if I heard this moment the flapping of the wings of the angel of death. And he has been flapping those grim wings to some purpose of late. Lucy's mother, Arthur's father, and now... Let me get on with my work. I duly relieved Van Helsing in his watch over Lucy. We wanted Arthur to go to rest also, but he refused at first. It was only when I told him that we should want him to help us during the day, that we must not all break down for want of rest, let Lucy suffer. That's when he agreed to go. Van Helsing was very kind to him. "Come, my child," he said. "Come with me. You're sick and weak and have had much sorrow and mental pain, as well as that tax on your strength that we know of. You must not be alone, for to be alone is to be full of fears and alarms. Come to the drawing-room, where there is a big fire and 2 sofas, and you shall lie on one and I on the other, and our sympathy will be comfort to one another, even though we do not speak." My child's awake. BRB. She thought she saw a ghost, dude. Ominous. She was like, Mommy, there's a ghost in my room. I was like, that's unsettling. I'm just talking about weird shit coming into people's windows in this book. I know. Why now? Why now, Clarky? Okay. Where were we? Right, Dr. Seward. We've got a couple pages left. Do you know who to call? Checks phone book. Arthur went with him, casting back a longing look at Lucy's face, which lay in her pillow almost whiter than the lawn. She lay quite still, and I looked around the room to see that all was as it should be. I could see the professor had carried out in this room, as in the other, his purpose of using garlic. The whole of the window sashes reeked with it, and round Lucy's neck over the silk handkerchief which Van Helsing made her keep on. It was a rough chaplet of the same odorous flowers. Lucy was breathing somewhat stertorously. Her face was at its worst, for the open mouth showed the pale gums, and her teeth, in the dim, uncertain light, seemed longer and sharper than they had been in the morning. In particular, by some trick of the light, the canine teeth looked longer and sharper than the rest. I sat down by her, and presently she moved uneasily. At the same moment there came a sort of dull flapping or buffeting at the window, so I went over to it softly and peeped out the corner of the blind. A full moonlight, and I could see the noise was a great bat which wheeled around, doubtless attracted by the light, although so dim. Every now and again it would strike the window with its wings. When I came back to my seat, I found that Lucy had moved slightly and torn away the garlic flowers from her throat. I replaced them as well as I could, and would sit watching her. Presently she woke. I gave her food, as Van Helsing had prescribed. She took only a little, languidly. There did not seem to be with her now the unconscious struggle for life and strength that had hitherto so marked her illness. It struck me as curious that the moment she became conscious she pressed the garlic flowers close to her. Certainly odd that whenever she got into the lethargic state with the stertorous breathing she put the flowers from her. When she waked, she clutched them close. There was no possibility of making any mistake about this. In the long hours that followed, she had many spells of sleeping and waking. She repeated both actions many times. At 6 o'clock Van Helsing came to relieve me. Arthur had then fallen into a doze, and he mercifully let him sleep on. When he saw Lucy's face, I could hear the hissing in-draw of breath. He said to me in a sharp whisper, "Draw up the blind. I want light." And then he bent down, and with his face almost touching Lucy's, examined her carefully. He removed the flowers, lifted the silk handkerchief from her throat, and as he did so he started back, and I could hear his ejaculation, "Mein Gott!" as it was smothered in his throat. I bent over and looked too, as I noticed a queer chill came over me. The wound on the throat had disappeared. For fully 5 minutes Van Helsing stood looking at her with his face at its sternest, and then he turned to me and said calmly, "She is dying. It will not be long now. It will be much different. Mark me, whether she dies conscious or in her sleep. Wake that poor boy. Let him come and see the last. He trusts us. We have promised him." I went to the dining room and waked him. He was dazed for a moment, but when he saw the sunlight streaming in through the edges of the shutters, he thought he was late. He expressed his fear, and I assured him Lucy was still asleep, but told him as gently as I could that both Van Helsing and I feared the end was near. He covered his face with his hands and slid down on his knees by the sofa and remained perhaps a minute with his head buried, praying, his shoulders shaking with grief. I took him by the hand and raised him up. "Come," I said, "my dear old fellow, summon your fortitude. It will be best and easiest for her." When we came into Lucy's room, I could see that Van Helsing had, with his usual forethought, been putting matters straight, made everything look as pleasing as possible. He had even brushed Lucy's hair so that it lay on the pillow in usual sunny ripples. When we came to the room, she opened her eyes, and seeing him, whispered softly,
Arthur. Oh, my love, I am so glad you've come.
He was stooping to kiss her when Van Helsing motioned him back.
No, he whispered, not yet. Hold her hand. It will, comfort her more.
Arthur took her hand and knelt beside her. She looked her best, with all the soft lines matching her angelic beauty of her eyes. Gradually, her eyes closed, and she sank to sleep, and for a little bit her breast heaved softly, and her breath came and went like a tired child's. Then, insensibly, there came the strange change, which I noticed in the night. Her breathing grew stertorous. The mouth opened. The pale gums drawn back made the teeth look longer and sharper than ever. In a sort of sleep-waking, vague, unconscious way, she opened her eyes, which were now dull and hard at once, and said in a soft, voluptuous voice, such as I had never heard from her lips, Arthur, oh my love, I am so glad you have come. Kiss me. Arthur bent eagerly to kiss her, but at that instant Van Helsing, who like me had been startled by her voice, swooped upon him, caught him by the neck with the fury of strength which I never thought he could have possessed, and hurled him nearly across the room. Not for your life, he said, not for your living soul and hers. He stood between them like a lion at bay. Arthur was taken aback. He didn't for a moment know what to do or to say, and before any impulse of violence could seize him, he realized the place and occasion and stood, silent and waiting. I kept my eyes fixed on Lucy, as did Van Helsing, and we saw a spasm as a rage flit like a shadow over her face. The sharp teeth champed together, her eyes closed, and she breathed heavily. Shortly after, she opened her eyes in all their softness, and putting out her poor, pale, thin hand, she took Van Helsing's great brown one, drawing it to her, and kissed it. My true friend. She said this in a faint voice, with untellable pathos. My true friend and his. Guard him. Give me peace. I swear it, he said solemnly, kneeling beside her, holding up his hand as one who registers an oath, and then he turned to Arthur and said to him, Come, take her hand in yours, kiss her on the forehead, only once. Oops! Sorry, rewind. Come, my child! Take her hand in yours, kiss her on the forehead, but only once. Their eyes met instead of their lips, and they parted. Lucy's eyes closed, and Van Helsing, who had been watching closely, took Arthur's arm and drew him away, and then Lucy's breathing became stertorous again, and all at once it ceased.
It is over,
said Van Helsing.
She is dead.
I took Arthur by the arm and led him away to the drawing room, where he sat down and covered his face with his hands, sobbing in a way that nearly broke me to see. I went back to the room and found Van Helsing looking at poor Lucy, his face sterner than ever. A change had come over her body. Death had given back part of her beauty. Her brow and cheeks, they recovered some of their flowing lines. Even the lips had lost the deadly pallor. It was as if the blood no longer needed for the working of the heart had gone to make the harshness of death as little rude as might be. We thought her dying whilst she slept, and sleeping whilst she died. I stood beside Van Helsing and said, Poor girl, there is peace for her at last. It is the end. He turned to me and said with grave solemnity,
Not so. Alas, not so. It is only the beginning.
And when I asked him what he meant, he only shook his head and answered,
We can do nothing as yet. Wait and see.
end chapter 12. Lucy's died. And she's finally at peace, and nothing else bad will happen. Oh, goodness. Yeah, the end. The book is over. We're about halfway through. About halfway through the book. When you like look at sections. Looking at it now. Made it about halfway through. Good job, everybody. Good story, good ending. Yeah, I'm wishing now. God. We made like normal Lucy and vampire Lucy. But I didn't think to make like sad normal Lucy. That was a big oversight on my part. I should have done that. The rest of the book is just epilogue. Yeah, the rest of the book is like, and then Jonathan became a partner at the firm. And then Mina became a stenographer. And then Dr. Seward went back, you know, to the place where he works. And Renfield was a good boy and never did anything wrong. It was all a dream. Did you not loosely plan to read a different take on the Dracula story? There's an alternate version of the Dracula book that was published in Iceland. So there's like an Icelandic version of Dracula that is a totally different story from the Dracula that we have. There's lots of speculation about how that happened. Because some of the things that happen in the Icelandic version match up really closely with Bram Stoker's early notes and his early drafts of the book Dracula. A lot of people who read both actually feel like the Icelandic version is better. So it's interesting. Yeah, I've thought it might be fun to read that. Yeah, I'm sorry for anybody who doesn't like the liberties that I take with Lucy specifically. Because I have her talk the way that she does, I sort of like adjust the way that her dialogue is written. So I'm sorry if that's annoying. I love Lucy too much to care. That's good. It's good vibes. I also love Lucy. And fortunately, her nightmare is over and she's dead now and nothing else is gonna happen. Van Helsing's gonna spend a couple days staring at Lucy and then be like, guess I was wrong. And then he's gonna go back to Amsterdam and everything's gonna be fine. Squints. I'm gonna miss Lucy. We definitely will never see or hear of her ever again. You know? Yeah, Van Helsing says, well, I guess that's it. Bye. Fantastic. Hey, let's, oh my goodness. Mark as complete. Dracula, chapters 9 through 12. So now we can start the new one. Dracula, chapters 13 through 16? 13, 14, 15, 16, yeah. Dracula, chapters 13 through 16. I believe we did 1,000,000. Oh no. believe we did 1 million those last times. 30 days. Change the background color to purple, obviously. Okay. Create. Nice. And start. It has begun. Okay. I'm gonna go to bed. Oh my god, it's 12:35. I'm gonna go to bed. I will see y'all around. Thanks so much for tuning in to our third dramatic Dracula reading. I'm sure we will have another one ready to go. In the meantime, super quick. An anonymous gifter gifted a bunch of subs right at the start of the stream. Thank you so much for that. William Block, thank you for the 3 years. Happy anniversary. Twig the Pleb for the 15 months. Nemo for the 10. Jerry Reg and RCS, thank you very much for the gifted subs. And Gideon, thank you for the 26. Immunodrazon for the 49. Self-Care Best Care for the 38. Chinbanda for the 3. Sir Buttwipe for the 2. And Avi just gifted 15 subs. Thank you so much, Avi. If you were gifted a sub by Avi or anybody else, please, please, please take the time to say thank you. Thank you so much, Avi. That's very sweet. Thanks for the reading. Where do you announce when you're doing these? So that's the problem, right? That's what I was just saying. I really need to do a better job of like letting people know I'm going to do these. Are we going to set up the community goal for 13 to 16? It's already open. It's up. We did it. We already did that. Yeah, I need to be better in general at, like, saying when I'm doing things. So I'll try to give a heads up this next time. All right. Thank you all very much for watching. Let me see. Squid Kid Inc. is doing a birthday stream. Let's go see. Cool. Let's go ahead and raid them. We've been suggested by Gideon. Thank you all very much for watching. Go spread love and joy. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I will be streaming again tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Okay? Bye-bye, everybody. Boop.